Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
The internet is full of half-truths and all-out lies. We've all seen them, and many people on social media complaining about it. Here's your chance to show and prove. WorldAfropedia.com is a black-owned and operated encyclopedia. There are several thousand articles, but we need help. We can't uncover all the truth ourselves. So please, join us and become a writer, editor, or blogger for WorldAfropedia.com today. Every little bit counts. We owe it to the future generations to put the truth out there. Visit WorldAfropedia.com, the African-centered encyclopedia, a global database of African knowledge for the purpose of bringing about global African wisdom and understanding. WorldAfropedia.com.
All around the world.
World nigga law.
Today, inquests were opened into the deaths of 5 of the 8 victims killed in this month's attack on the London Bridge and Borough Market. Investigators continuing to find out what's known about the 3 attackers, a British citizen born in Pakistan, a Moroccan Libyan, and a Moroccan Italian. The car and knife attack shattered a Saturday night. It was one of several in the past few months claimed by ISIS, and it's added to the ongoing question. In the puzzle that is terrorism, what are the puzzle parts? Yes, extremist ideology. Yes, a region destabilized by recent wars. But how much is this unrest tied to Europe's colonial history? Michael Provence is a professor of Middle East history at the University of California, San Diego. He's also got a new book out, The Last Ottoman Generation and the Making of the Modern Middle East. He joins us now. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And, our call to you was prompted by a question from a young person as we were watching coverage of the Saturday night attack. And he said, why are there so many people from other countries in England? Could you remind us, how did that happen?
Well, of course, Britain and France dominated a lot of the world as colonial empires from the 19th century into about the middle of the last century, the 20th century. So all of North Africa, much of Central Africa were French colonies, and much of the Middle East, Syria, Lebanon, French colonies, British colonies in Palestine, today's Israel, Jordan, Iraq, informal colony in Iran, of course, all of South Asia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Burma.
Well, can you make a tie? Can you make a direct tie between that colonial imperialist history and what's happening today?
Well, maybe not a direct tie, but there's certain things that I think are important. Colonial governments don't colonize countries based on consent. And in a situation of continual crisis of legitimacy, colonial governments dominate their populations by violence and recourse to different types of corruption. And so these kinds of habits, I think, have a long afterlife. And we see that in the Middle East today and in other regions as well. There's a habit of corruption and of dealing with internal dissent in a violent way. So that's the main legacy, I would say, of the colonial governments.
Well, and others are very happy to draw a really straight line. Here's a headline from The Guardian. Immigration will remain a toxic issue until Britain faces up to its colonial past. Here's one from Salon, The Secret History of Terror in Europe, How Our Blindness to a Century of Mistakes is Making Everyone Less Safe. And it goes on to say, Great Britain and France transformed what had been a relatively quiet province of the Ottoman Empire into one of the least stable and internationally explosive states in the world. It's not just about what happened in the colonial eras, but it's about how parts of the world were carved up.
Well, the real carve-up of the Middle East, of course, was after the First World War, when all of the countries of the region were written out on the map in secret negotiations between Britain and France, and then adjudicated immediately after the First World War, a little less than 100 years ago from today. So the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the conflict between Kurdistan and the surrounding states, the Lebanese Civil War, and in a way, the Syrian Civil War today. All of these things have their roots directly in that period and those kinds of decisions that were made by British and French policymakers at that time. So when people are fleeing the continual conflicts, they're fleeing the colonial legacy itself.
Well, and you're talking about the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916.
That's right.
It gave what was then Mesopotamia, Iraq, the Gulf area, and the regions that were bordering then Palestine to Great Britain. Syria, and most of the eastern part of the region was given to France. Stephen Kinzer, the former New York Times correspondent, is one of those who says it's no coincidence that France and Britain, two of the countries most affected by recent terror attacks, have this history as two of the most outstanding empires. But remind us further why peoples who were under the empire, why would they end up in France and Britain?
They fled war and conflict that was brought by the colonial government in India with partition, with the Algerian Civil War, with the Lebanese Civil War, with civil wars that are taking place now. And they came for economic reasons and in search of a better life, like anyone else. But the generations who have grown up in these countries are often not treated very well and don't enjoy full citizenship rights or access to the kinds of things that the full citizens of these countries enjoy. So there's a sort of a differential model of citizenship in some cases.
Well, and we have to add, too, for France, you have the defeat in the Algerian War of Independence. I mean, Algeria threw off the yoke of colonialism.
That's right. And in a situation of appalling violence where the French government killed hundreds of thousands of people in order to hang on to Algeria over the course of a couple of years and then abandon the country anyway. So these kinds of things and the colonial counterinsurgencies that Britain and France waged, people haven't dealt with them. They haven't discussed them. It's not part of the public discourse on a very serious level in these countries. So the wounds that continue to fester over the colonial history are undealt with, are undiscussed.
And what should have happened? Because the other thing that we're seeing as police race into these neighborhoods where it's suspected some of these attackers have come from, these are insulated neighborhoods. They are usually made up of just the immigrant population. Should there have been an attempt to integrate them more fully into the mainstream population? Did the people who came not want to be mainstream?
Well,
what happened there?
I mean, colonialism, and we can draw on the recent history of the United States and Iraq, can only really happen in a situation where people in the colonizing country, in the militarily dominant country, imagine that the people of other countries don't have the same rights or even the same consciousness or same race that they have. So there's an idea that they are entitled to dominate other people, and this is kind of the first step for a colonizing country. Once those people come and try to gain full citizenship in the countries that used to colonize them, that racial rift, that cleavage, doesn't just go away. Mm-hmm. So those people are disenfranchised and not offered the same kind of employment or the same kind of educational facilities or the same housing or the same rights to participate and to represent themselves in the countries where they find themselves.
We're reading others say that in order to colonize somebody, in order to suppress a population, you have to think of them as less than. That's why you need to rule over them. And so you're saying that doesn't go away even over generations.
That's right. I mean, if we remember the kind of things that American politicians said about Iraq before the invasion, they're failing at modernity, and we have to go and bring Iraq into the modern world. So this kind of arrogance doesn't square well with integrating people and assimilating people who are different.
But is there something that could have been done? For instance, now we're seeing the newly elected French president, Emmanuel Macron, describe French rule in Algeria as barbaric, a crime against humanity. He was roundly criticized by the right for that. But is that something that people in North Africa need to hear?
Well, the people in North Africa have their own problems. But France and Britain have not been immigrant societies in a simple way. The United States is different. And so the story of people coming here and becoming Americans without most people questioning their Americanness is quite different than the experience in Europe, where people who come from North Africa, even after many generations, or from Turkey, or from the Arab states, will be asked again and again and again, what are you really? Even if you speak French perfectly, even if you have a Manchester accent, people will not accept that you are truly English or truly French. And until that changes, there will be angry, disaffected, disenfranchised people who act out in ways that are traumatic for everyone.
Do you think maybe the U.S. is changing now as well?
I hope not. If we change in that way, it won't be a good thing.
That's Michael Provence, professor of Middle East history at the University of California, San Diego. Again, taking a look at just one puzzle part in the story of terrorism.
Dude, so what happened?
I got caught with a girl.
Your girlfriend?
Yeah.
They got black people here?
She's white.
Another black man succumbs.
50 years ago today, Richard and Mildred Loving won the right to live as husband and wife in Virginia in a landmark Supreme Court case. Richard was white. Mildred described herself as, quote, part Negro and part Indian. At the time, 16 states banned mixed-race marriages. NPR's Hansi-Lo Wang recently met with an interracial couple in Virginia who say that story resonates with them today.
Like many couples, DJ and Angela Ross fell in love on the dance floor.
So we were dancing to, what is it, The Time of My Life?
The time of my life.
I swear to you, it was as if there was no one in the room.
I don't remember anything else but just me and her. It's like everybody else just disappeared.
But the two were not supposed to end up together, according to their families. DJ is black, and Angela is white.
My grandma on both sides used to tell me, well, you better leave those white girls alone or else we're going to come find you hanging from a tree or just different stuff like that.
I mean, I grew up, you can have friends with black people and that's fine, but don't ever marry a black man.
But on Valentine's Day, 2008, Angela tied the knot with DJ in Virginia. That would have been illegal more than 50 years ago, when state law designed to, quote, preserve racial integrity prevented a white person from marrying someone who was not white. Richard and Mildred Loving were thrown in jail and later banished from Virginia for breaking that law in 1958.
This period was a very dangerous period. You didn't want publicity for them still living in the South.
Philip Hirschkopf was one of the lawyers with the American Civil Liberties Union who argued the Lovings case before the U.S. Supreme Court.
President Kennedy was assassinated. Medgar Evers was assassinated. The girls were killed at the church in Alabama. These were very tough, difficult times.
Still, on June 12, 1967, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously in favor of the Lovings. Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote in the opinion that, quote, the freedom to marry or not marry a person of another race resides with the individual and cannot be infringed by the state.
I can't even believe that was only 50 years ago.
I can't imagine just going through what they went through.
Marrying outside your race still comes with challenges for DJ and Angela Ross.
It's true that we can be together in the open, but with some things I don't think we've made much progress. I mean, just discrimination still happens.
When we all have gone out as a family, the looks that we get, people shaking their head, number one, because we're a big family, but two, that we're married with 5 biracial children.
Angela says she's learned to have more self-control over the years.
Someone may look at me that disagrees with my choice in marrying my husband. I can't take that on. I can't take on their opinion of me because I know my value and I know my self-worth.
Opinions about interracial marriages have shifted dramatically over the past 50 years, with declining opposition to interracial marriages today. The share of newlyweds in interracial marriages has grown sharply, according to a recent Pew Research Center report. Now, 1 out of every 6 newlyweds is married to someone of a different race. Next year, Angela and DJ Ross are set to celebrate their 10th wedding anniversary. They're focused on providing a safe home for their family among the rolling green hills outside of Roanoke, Virginia.
And what's over here, Mariana? What's planted here?
Broccoli.
More broccoli, cauliflower.
I think this is jalapenos.
Angela homeschools their 2 youngest daughters, Mariana and Jordis, in their garden and living room. From there, you can see cows and horses grazing on farmland. DJ says he's at peace out here with his family.
As soon as I get here, it's like everything is just gone. I don't have to worry about people looking at me differently because I'm home.
He adds, it's just us here. Hansi-Lo Wang, NPR News.
To me.
As Golden Girls go, she is an original. She is the 2017 American Liberty High Relief Gold Coin, celebrating the U.S. Mint's 225th anniversary. This newest Liberty coin features the face of a black woman adorned with a patriotic headband made of stars. Liberty's stars crown her signature hairstyle, braids of slim golden ropes neatly tucked into a bun, the ends trailing down the nape of her neck. These braids are just like the ones Deanna and Maya Cook wore at Mystic Valley Regional Charter School. The twin 15-year-olds' long braids were lengthened by extensions. The school said the braids violated the school's dress code, which also banned hair coloring and nail polish. But according to the girl's mother, the school overlooked students with colored hair and targeted black and biracial students. Colleen Cook told the Boston Globe, "Braided hair gives them pride. They want to partake in their culture." Because of their braids, the twins were banned from the prom and punished with several days of detention an hour before and after school. The girls' protest brought them national attention and advocacy support from both the NAACP and the ACLU, who called the school's action racist. But administrators from Mystic Valley Regional Charter insisted the dispute wasn't about race, but rules. Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey disagreed, citing state and federal violations by subjecting students of color, especially black students, to differential treatment. For black women, hair is a cultural flashpoint, never as simple as it's just hair. Those of us who wear our hair in afros, twists, locks, or braids are often subject to unsolicited commentary, sometimes overtly racist. As Phoebe Williams, author of the book You Can't Touch My Hair, observes, black hair seems to raise a lot of non-black people's blood pressure. Here are a few examples. The U.S. military's ban on black hairstyles sparked a public, months-long protest and sharp rebuke from African-American congresswomen. The military reversed the ban, but meteorologist Rhonda Lee was fired after politely defending her natural hair to a viewer who wrote that she needs to wear a wig or grow some more hair. As young women, tennis stars Venus and Serena Williams were mocked and taunted because of their beaded braids. And when actress Zendaya Coleman wore dreadlocks to the Oscars 2 years ago, Fashion Police host Juliana Rancic suggested on air that she probably smelled like weed. The 18-year-old Zendaya pushed back, noting the typical harsh criticism of African-American hair and ignorant people who choose to judge others based on the curl of their hair. There's been plenty of judgment about the new gold coin featuring Lady Liberty with braids, and sales are lagging. But a small victory for the Cook family. Mystic Valley Regional Charter School has lifted its braid ban, though the school maintains it was never racially motivated. Deanna and Maya, I'm happy that you can wear a hairstyle that makes you feel good about who you are. Welcome to the club. I'm Callie Crossley, WGBH, Boston's local NPR.
I don't want us to lose sight that things are getting better. Each successive generation seems to be making progress in changing attitudes when it comes to race. Doesn't mean we're in a post-racial society. It doesn't mean that racism is eliminated. But, you know, when I talk to Malia and Sasha, and I listen to their friends and I see them interact, they're better than we are. They're better than we were on these issues. And that's true in every community that I've visited all across the country.
New tonight, reports of racially motivated crimes in one of Asheville's more affluent neighborhoods. News 13's Justin Hinton is live in Biltmore Park tonight. Justin, neighbors are using a specific website to make sure their community stays informed.
Yeah, they are basically turning their real-life next-door neighbors into their virtual neighbors through a website called Nextdoor. Now, we've been on it, and in the past week, we found reports of racially motivated hate crimes, a break-in, and a mugging, all happening within about a week's time span.
The more we know, the more we're aware.
Bev Hollis is no stranger to the website Nextdoor, staying up to date on what's happening in Biltmore Park.
Everyone wants to know where the bear is.
But it's the strangers, she says, in the shadows of her neighborhood who are the real problems, causing her to make a post of her own, writing about two teens at Pinchot and Columbine approaching her and using the N-word to describe a group of people they said they hate, before laughing and driving off.
A little confusing and a little disheartening.
She quickly found out that wasn't the area's only racially charged message in the past few days. Someone else posting about a swastika on a tree they saw just behind Estes Elementary. This is that image. We came out here to try and find it, but we couldn't, and probably for good reason. The person who found it says she came out here and took a hammer to it because she was so disgusted. Another post described a possible mugging on a trail near the Biltmore Park pool. And then the last one, again from Hollis, about 2 car break-ins at the YMCA. She even found a cell phone belonging to one of the victims on the ground just a couple of blocks away.
She was really shaken when she found me and got the phone, but she just said they just blew the windows right out.
4 incidents detailed on the site within a week.
It's just kind of hard to believe that we can have these crimes going on right in the middle of the day and we're not vigilant or we're not noticing, and that's why I just want everyone to start being vigilant.
Yeah, vigilance really is key. She says sometimes you forget or take for granted where exactly you live, so this is certainly a good reminder of that. Reporting live in Nashville, Justin Hinton, News 13.
As your body grows bigger, your mind must flower. It's great to learn, 'cause knowledge is power. It's Schoolhouse Rockin', the chip on the block, on your favorite Schoolhouse.
The majority of teachers across the country are white, but the student population is much more diverse. A panel of local education experts will be on stage at Town Hall Seattle to talk about how that gap can impact everyone inside schools. Sharon Navas is taking part in that discussion. She's the executive director of the Equity in Education Coalition. Navas sat down with 88.5's Kristen Kendrick ahead of the event to explain why it's important to talk about a lack of teachers of color.
When did you found the Equity in Education Coalition, and why?
The Equity in Education Coalition was founded on August 22nd of 2012. And it's a very specific date in my mind because it was the second meeting of about 15 people of color, leaders of color in Seattle, that were sort of talking about the McCleary decision that had just come down from the state Supreme Court and this innate fear that a lot of us had that the state legislature to fund education was going to start defunding social services, food assistance, healthcare. And as the founder, I had just stopped working for another education advocacy organization. And I turned to my co-founder, Tony Lee, who was at the time working at Solid Ground. And I said, you know, there's no statewide education advocacy organization of color for people of color, staffed by people of color. And he turns to me and he says, so what are you doing next week? I was like, got it. Okay. We're funding an organization now. Okay, here we go.
The coalition isn't just focused on students, though. There's another issue in play, and that's the staff that teaches at these schools. And the majority of public school teachers in the country are white. So what is it like in a school for a new teacher who also happens to be a person of color? I mean, you're wearing many hats.
There's so much research that's now indicating that having a teacher of color is good for not just kids of color, but also white students. And at the end of the day, we want a really good educational system for each and every student in Washington State. To get more students of color really apt for learning, they have to have someone that looks like them and can understand some of the hurdles that they're going through. For us, it's not just getting more teachers of color in the school building, but it's retaining them so that they're there, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and they can share their knowledge with kids.
Retention seems to be the key because there are so many challenges for new teachers of color because the students see them and identify with them and come to them with issues that aren't just school related, right?
Yeah. So a lot of our teachers, when we talk to them, they've described themselves as being the social worker, the guidance counselor, the uncle or aunt that cares, the one constant adult, because they're in front of kids 8 to 10 hours a day. So, as a student of color, when you see that you've got a teacher of color, you're going to tell all your friends of color, right? And then suddenly you're the one person that gets it all. And not only that, you have the pressure of maintaining that relationship with your students, but then you have the pressure of maintaining a relationship with your staff and your administration. And it's a really hard place to be for our teachers.
What changes do you see need to be made at the school district level and even at the state level to really turn a corner?
We never really talk about race, and it's really hard to solve systems of racism when we don't talk about it. And there have been some really great examples of racial equity teams coming out from school buildings where they actually tackle some of these issues. One of the hurdles is, of course, that usually all the people of color get tasked to be on the racial equity teams, and then you're sort of talking to yourself about stuff that you know is happening. We have institutions that are inherently good for some people and inherently bad for others. And to fix education, we have to look at who's performing the worst and why institutionally, because it's not genetic. It's not that children of color are not achieving to their maximum because they're not learning. It's that the educational system is not teaching them to their fullest potential.
That was Equity and Education Coalition Executive Director Sharon Navas speaking with 88.5's Kirsten Kendrick.
Y'all remember y'all's ancestors used to hang us for kicks? Motherfucker on the weekend, hot, couldn't get no pussy. If you was in jail, that was your ass. Let's go down to jail and just get one of them, just straight up. Sound like fun? Yeah.
A Brevard High School student is charged with threatening an African-American student with a noose while using a racial slur.
Tonight, the victim is sharing his story and demanding administrators listen closely to what he has to say.
News 13's Kimberly King is live outside Brevard High School. And Kim, this student and his mother say they're scared.
Tammy, they say they are, and it's why they say they are going public with his story. They feel that administrators here at Brevard High School and in Transylvania County are not taking their pleas for help seriously, and they fear that this student could be right back here in the fall.
It was after school, and I was walking home, and he called me over to his truck.
That is how Quentin Sample French says the alleged hate crime started.
He called me the N-word. I started walking home, and he said, "I have a noose for you right now," and he pulled one out of the bed of his truck.
Quentin's mother says the principal showed her surveillance from the school's back parking lot.
You see the defendant get out of his truck, and then the next thing that you see is him swinging the noose.
She says she then saw the defendant chasing her son, swinging the noose made out of a ratchet strap with a loop. The student charged with 3 misdemeanors: simple assault, ethnic intimidation, and communicating threats. The report states the teen said the racial slur, stating, "I am going to hang you." The report goes on to reference the alleged assault was because of the victim's race and color. Quentin says there's systemic racism among some students.
I can't count how many people I hear basically every day at that school that say the N-words.
You feel there needs to be more conversation about race relations?
Yes, I do. And I think the school doesn't care. I feel like they don't really care about what's said at the school. Otherwise, this wouldn't keep happening.
In 2015, police arrested 3 Brevard High School students on allegations of race intimidation. Quentin's mother doesn't know how to convince administrators to do more.
It hurts. It hurts. It hurts even more that my son have to, it just hurts.
She also feels the student in this case should be charged with a more serious crime.
He had a noose. That does not collaborate as a weapon. He introduced it as a weapon. Come here, I'm going to hang you. You're not going to hang somebody with a word.
In a statement, the sheriff said this type of behavior is wrong and cannot be tolerated, stating my office will always investigate any allegations and pursue charges to the fullest extent that North Carolina law will allow us. School superintendent for Transylvania County, Jeff McDarris, said legally he cannot say much, but said I can share that the matter was immediately investigated by school officials and appropriately handled. Reporting live from Brevard High School, Kimberly King, News 13.
So how's the college responding to this incident?
We're having a race forum.
And what's that?
A forum on race, so we can discuss the incident. And the surrounding issues of race.
So the usual lip service.
No comment.
In a disturbing story out of the South Bay, students at a high school are accused of creating a kill list targeting African-American students. KPIX5 reporter Len Ramirez on parents who say the school district tried to cover this up. Len?
That's because it took so long for this to become public. Now, what happened here on some computers and social media at Monte Vista High School was so disturbing and so threatening to one African-American girl and her family that they filed a civil rights lawsuit and pulled her out of school.
What is your main focus for today? Then it says lynch.
Attorney Richard Richardson is holding a printout of a computer screen from Monte Vista High School in Cupertino. It's some of the evidence he'll use in a civil rights lawsuit filed against the Fremont Union High School District and administrators at Monte Vista, who he says failed to adequately protect African-American students who were targeted by 6 to 10 mixed-race boys on a racist kill list.
They called themselves kill spree masters. They went on to say that they were going to kill each student. They created a kill list. On that list were the names of 6 to 7 African-American students in the school.
The lawsuit was filed on behalf of the family of one of the female students targeted on the list.
They mentioned her by name. They gave a specific and credible threat that they would riddle her with bullets, and they talked about how many bullets it would take.
The incident happened last fall and also included disparaging remarks against women, but it only came to light recently when it was published by students in a school magazine. A coalition of South Bay civil rights groups accused the district of a cover-up.
The same thing happened in Columbine. Those kids made threats. People took it lightly, went home, and those kids went and made bombs. And the same thing could have happened here. Thank God it didn't. But who knows what's really going on out there at Monte Vista High School.
District officials would not comment but issued a statement that says it became aware of the situation and that, quote, Monte Vista High School staff immediately investigated and took appropriate disciplinary action. Several students at Monte Vista say they have heard the N-word being used more and more freely at school, but most had no idea that some classmates were taking racial remarks to such an extreme.
I really thought that Cupertino was sort of a bubble inside of a bubble where none of this stuff ever happened. And it turns out that I was wrong, and it turns out that all this malicious content exists here too.
The Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department says it launched an intensive investigation and recently turned over that case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. No other details of that case were released, and the identities of the people involved or the suspects are being withheld because they are all minors.
Georgia, Georgia, the whole day through, just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind.
New developments in a case that we first told you about in January 2013. A lawsuit filed against dozens of Lowndes County and state officials in the Kendrick Johnson case have now been dismissed. That motion was filed today by Judge W. Lewis Sands. Sands explained in a 7-page order that Johnson's family did not comply with court orders and rules. As a result, that $100 million lawsuit was dismissed without prejudice, meaning Johnson's family can refile if they choose to do so. Johnson was found dead in a rolled-up gym mat at Lowndes High School in January 2013. The first autopsy showed he died of suffocation. The second ruled the cause of death as blunt force trauma. By the end of October that year, a federal investigation was launched. The following summer, Johnson's parents filed a lawsuit against the Lowndes County school system and the County Board of Education. A year later, in July 2015, federal investigators raided the home of 2 brothers who went to school with Johnson. By June 2016, the Justice Department had ended their federal investigation.
The Department of Justice now closing this investigation with, quote, insufficient evidence to support federal criminal charges. That coming from a statement released just moments ago. Now, you'll remember that Kendrick Johnson was found dead at his high school in South Georgia upside down in a rolled gym mat. That was January of 2013. Investigators then said his death was accidental. The family did not believe that. They believed their son was beaten. They had his body exhumed, and pathologists found evidence of blunt force trauma, calling this a homicide. Well, the Department of Justice says that investigators, to establish any federal criminal rights violation, would have had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that not only that someone killed Kendrick Johnson, but that his killing was motivated by racial animus. And that was a very high threshold. They have not met that threshold, according to their estimation. The Johnsons, Kendrick Johnson's parents, Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson, are right now meeting with the U.S. Attorney here in Macon, Georgia, the acting U.S. Attorney from Northern Ohio, where this case is being led, also with other officials here to get the news that they were hoping that they would not get at the end of this. Now, what this news release that has just been sent out does not say is definitively how Kendrick Johnson died. In fact, at the end of this statement from Carol Rendon, who's the acting USA in Northern Ohio, she writes, we regret that we are unable to provide them with more definitive answers about Kendrick's tragic death. So no federal criminal charges in this case, but still no answers after more than 3.5 years for Johnson's parents about exactly how he died.
I was in the land of cotton, whose times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland.
I'm Carol Hills, and you're with The World. The Southern Baptist Convention was in the spotlight this week when it took up the issue of racism at its annual meeting. It started with a resolution written by a black Baptist pastor from Texas. He wanted the Southern Baptists to officially denounce white nationalism and the so-called alt-right movement. At first, his resolution was ignored, but after much drama, the convention did overwhelmingly vote to denounce every form of racism, including white supremacy. Emma Green writes about religion for The Atlantic magazine. Emma, before we get into the details of this story, remind us, who are the Southern Baptists? I know it's one of the largest Christian denominations in the country, isn't it?
They are the largest Protestant denomination, and second to Roman Catholics is the largest Christian population in the United States. And they have churches and members all over the country. They tend to be conservative, evangelical Protestant Christians.
And what about the racial makeup in the pews among Southern Baptists today?
There's a significant portion of Southern Baptists who are African American or other racial minorities, and a number of Southern Baptist churches are mixed. Although the different traditions within the Southern Baptist Convention of African American worship and white worship tend to lead congregations to sometimes stay separate, there have been many efforts in the past couple of years in particular to try to merge congregations or get conversations happening between populations in the Southern Baptist Convention of different racial makeups.
Now tell us a little about this pastor from Texas. His name is Dwight McKissick. What was he trying to do with this resolution at the Southern Baptist Convention?
McKissick has always been a leader on racial issues within the Southern Baptist Convention and has tried to push these issues to the fore. He leads a large congregation in Arlington, Texas, and he, with this resolution, was trying to get the convention to take on the alt-right and white supremacy head first. This was an effort by McKissick to make the convention make a clear statement about what they believe about white supremacy.
And he himself is African American. What did the resolution say?
The resolution focused in very strong language on the alt-right movement that has emerged in the last few years in American politics, and particularly around the last election. It talked about the retrograde ideologies, xenophobic biases, and racial bigotries of the so-called alt-right, and called on the Southern Baptist Convention to condemn nationalism, to condemn white supremacy, and condemn that alt-right movement.
Now, condemning the alt-right and white nationalism, it seems like a no-brainer. Why was this resolution held up at first?
The Resolutions Committee thought that the proposal was not written in quite the right way, and so they decided not to report it out. McKissick even tried to get reconsideration. He made a motion on the floor to get a 2/3 vote to have more time allotted for his resolution to be considered. But ultimately, that failed as well, and this started a total tailspin of chaos when it looked like the Southern Baptist Convention had declined to consider this resolution condemning the alt-right.
How is it resolved? In the end, they have come out against them.
At a late night meeting, they gathered and finally decided to suspend the rules to make an exception, which generally these conventions are very procedurally driven. They broke those rules, though, in order to be able to the next day reconsider a newly drafted proposal which mirrored a lot of McKissick's language. And on Wednesday afternoon, they in fact voted almost unanimously in favor of this condemnation of the alt-right.
Now, in the end, was it seen as kind of a procedural, kind of at the end of the day and we're all tired, kind of oversight, or does it tap into kind of raw nerves within Southern Baptists in terms of ambivalence about the alt-right?
Certainly the leaders of the convention tried to explain this as mostly a procedural mishap or something that had been caused by confusion. But a number of people pointed out that this reveals the blind spots that can sometimes happen within Southern Baptist life, and particularly within its leadership ranks, when there aren't people of diverse backgrounds who are making decisions. And there was a lot of emotion. This really revealed fracture lines within the Southern Baptist Convention over racial divisions that are going to continue beyond any resolution.
I mean, the Southern Baptists have a kind of tough history regarding slavery. Tell us about that, and specifically this concept of the curse of Ham.
The Southern Baptist Convention is a denomination that was explicitly founded to support slavery. It split off from other Baptist denominations because the leaders of the nascent movement wanted to be able to hold slaves. And the denomination has been wrestling with that history ever since the Civil War. They have made apologies for their role in upholding notions of racial supremacy, especially during the Jim Crow period. And this is where theories like the curse of Ham come into play. This is an interpretation of the Bible which says that African Americans or dark-skinned people are inferior to white-skinned people. It was used as justification for slaveholding and also used as justification for segregation. This has now been repudiated, but what McKissick was trying to do with his resolution was get the Southern Baptist Convention to apologize for that theory head on.
And in the end, does the resolution they came up with, does it come in the form of an apology?
It's not exactly an apology, but it is a straightforward acknowledgement of the Southern Baptist Convention's history and also the progress that it's trying to make for the future. It doesn't, for example, mention the curse of Ham by name, which is something that McKissick wished it had done, but it does speak in very frank terms about the need for racial justice and reconciliation among Southern Baptists. The resolution tried to be more hopeful in the revised version. It talked about the resolution, for example, condemning the Confederate flag that happened in 2016, or a previous resolution in 2015 that had called for racial reconciliation. Ultimately, this resolution is one step in a long trajectory that the Southern Baptist Convention has had in trying to take on racism and issues of racial division.
Emma Green writes about religion for The Atlantic magazine. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.
Alabama's got me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn.
Severed head was found on the front porch of a Jackson home, and about 2 miles away, a headless body was found burned in a wooded area. WJTV's Katie Rose spoke to police to figure out if these two gruesome scenes were connected.
I got to admit, I've never seen anything like this.
What started out as a report of suspicious activity took a gruesome turn when officials arrived on scene.
Officers were flagged down and they were advised there was what appeared to be a human head of an unidentified black male located on the front porch of a residence within this block.
Officials tell us the head was found on Deer Park Street just after 9 this morning, but just hours after the head was discovered, police were called to a wooded area on Green Avenue, just a few miles from that scene.
A citizen reported what they thought might be a human body.
And when police arrived, that's exactly what they found.
It is the remains of a human that did not have a head attached to it.
We're told the remains were found burned as well. Right now, police are still trying to figure out if the two incidents are related.
Many times, criminals will intend to place something at a certain place, but they may have had the wrong location. There's no indicator specifically at this point.
The reasoning behind these crimes is still unknown, but neighbors tell us they think they know what might have caused them.
The thing I can see that comes to mind is somebody sending a message to somebody. It's an awful thing. Can't put it in words. It's sad, but it's true.
Katie Rowe, WJTV 12.
Autopsy results show Jerome Jackson died from decapitation. Jackson also suffered a non-deadly gunshot wound to the leg. Yesterday, police confirmed the severed head and burned torso found Saturday belonged to Jeremy Jackson. Now investigators, well, they are hoping tips will come in from the public that can point them toward a suspect. David Kinney joins us with the very latest. David?
Tonight, Jackson police are offering a $20,000 reward through Crime Stoppers for any information in the Jeremy Jackson murder. Also, in the meantime, the victim's family praying they solve this case quickly.
And I was his big brother. I used to always tell him, it's good to have a big brother.
Through tears, Johnny Jackson recounts the last time he saw his younger brother, Jeremy. It was last Friday. He then got the call Saturday of his disturbing murder.
It was a message sent to somebody or to the city, because you don't just kill somebody's body in the bushes and then take their head and put it on display. They displayed him. And you can ride down the street and see it on the step.
Jackson says his brother Jeremy lived with him. When he wasn't home taking care of his 3 children, he was studying to better his life.
He don't bother no one. He's a Jackson State student. He just got out of school. He got a 3.0 GPA average. He got a social degree. He's working on this master. They haven't had no problems at home. They ain't had no problems in the streets.
Jerome Jackson is one of 9 siblings who are now heartbroken, praying his murder is solved quickly.
Because he might do it to someone else. We need to stop this. You know, we need to stop the violence. We need to stop all this, unnecessary killing. But this kind of stuff really need to be found, because he might do this again.
If you or anyone you know has any information about the Jeremy Jackson murder, you're urged to call Crime Stoppers at 601-355-8477. In Jackson, David Kenny, 3 on your side.
Yeah. You're still saying there's no profiling, but it is. It is. We're being hunted every day. It's a silent war against African-American people as a whole.
The last time we caught up with you, the jury in the trial of Officer Geronimo Yanez was in the middle of deliberations. They began their work Monday afternoon, came back Wednesday after they were unable to reach a verdict, and the judge sent them back to keep deliberating. Today is Friday. About an hour ago, our reporters Reham Fashir and John Collins got the alert that the jury had reached its verdict. They headed to the courtroom on the 8th floor of the Ramsey County Courthouse, and they're still over there right now. Our producer, Tracy Mumford, is live on the air right now, so I caught up with Reham after the verdict was read.
A jury found Officer Philando Yanez not guilty on all 3 counts, the second-degree manslaughter charge and the 2 felony firearms charges that he was charged with for endangering Diamond Reynolds and Philando Castile.
Okay. So what was the reaction in the courtroom?
The judge initially said that no one was allowed to leave the courtroom until he adjourned, but Philando Castile's mother, Valerie Castile, did not wait for that. As soon as she heard the not guilty on the 3rd count, she got up, visibly upset, and yelling profanity, and she just walked out of the courtroom. The deputies could not stop her from walking out, and the rest of the family was crying and visibly shaken. Then I looked over on Yanez's side, and his lawyer, Earl Gray, was obviously happy and smiling, and as soon as the judge adjourned, he was hugging Officer Yanez's family. His mother was tearing up, and Yanez's wife was also kind of visibly, nervous. But he was free to go after that. The judge said that he was free to go.
Wow. So a lot of emotion in the courtroom just now.
A lot of emotion in the courtroom, a lot of emotion. And, Valerie Castile has been composed this whole time, this whole trial. I had not seen her react to anything at all, and this is the first time that I saw her in this way, that I saw her react this way, obviously angry and upset.
Right. And so now what?
Well, now people are just kind of trying to process everything. It was obviously a shock to the family of Philando Castile. They really thought that the state had done a good job presenting the case. They had a lot of faith in the prosecution team, but it's very shocking to them to see this result after 29 hours of deliberations, and they come to this, not guilty on all 3 counts.
So is the courthouse full of people? Have you even gotten a chance to see anything outside the courtroom?
Yes, the courthouse is full of people. The 8th floor was full of people leaving the courtroom, and we were all ushered downstairs. No one was allowed to stay up there, and the families were allowed to go first. Then the jurors were dismissed through the back, and Officer Yanez was also taken that way, the back way. And when I walked downstairs, I saw additional security. This is more security than I've seen this whole trial. There are a lot of deputies around. There are a lot of St. Paul police around.
And are they allowing people to stay at the courthouse at all, or are they ushering people outside?
They are ushering people outside. At least for us, we were ordered to leave where we were on the 8th floor. And there are more people gathering outside the courthouse with a lot of TV cameras, national media, local media, and it looks like the Castile family is actually talking right now. Judge Glenda Hatchett looks like she's actually talking to the media right now. So.
Okay. Well, thank you, Reham. I know you've got a lot more people to catch up with, but thanks for checking in.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You know, I've always wanted to be a cop. A racially offensive video is casting a cloud over the Boston Police Department. The clip introduces a white officer and dog and says black people have met their match. The video has been denounced by community leaders and local officials. The video is also under investigation, and questions remain, especially about who's responsible for producing it and getting it posted. Among those speaking out about the video are the founder and executive director of the New Democracy Coalition, Kevin Peterson, and the president and CEO of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, Darnell Williams. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Darnell, we've seen the video, but we don't know much else about how it got there and who put it together. So what do we know?
Well, what we know is that I guess the individuals who were responsible for its production thought they were doing kind of like a Friday night comedy special. And for the first part, it was kind of a spoof and was kind of innocuous and harmless. But then it took a turn for the worse when it said, it showed some scenes of a couple of young people with hoods on, black males, and then some, not scantily clad, but Caribbean festival black females in the video, and then said, you've met your match, and you look out this summer. So it took something that could have been funny and humorous, and it took a racial turn for the worse. And it really wasn't the brightest idea for somebody to try to put that together. That's what we know.
And Kevin, I guess the main thing here is that this depicts all black people negatively.
Yeah, it stereotypes black people across the board, and then takes a historical turn to raising the issue of dogs as a weapon, so to speak, towards black people. We know about those images from the Civil Rights Movement. Dr. King and others marched in Birmingham. Dogs were let loose on black people. And that image is searing within black consciousness in Boston, but across the country. So to raise that particular image is entirely offensive and threatening.
Darnell, what about the whole tone of this too? This is about the summertime, and this is like this sort of almost cartoonish expectation that we have this hostile element out there, and the police are going to be trying to do something. I mean, how did you feel about that?
Other than having a burr in my saddle, there's some stronger words that I would normally use, but not in this forum. That I was upset. It was disturbing. It was very troubling, because even the categorization on the front side of the video clip is good versus evil. And so that to me was, well, we're the good guys and those are the evil people. And then he lumped everybody together, all black people as being evil. That is very, very, and as a black male, that's just so disturbing considering what is happening across this nation with law enforcement and African American males. It has not been a storybook ending. And so it's very, very troubling on that note. And so really you have a very raw feeling in your spirit and in your soul that this needs to be dealt with, needs to be dealt with swiftly. And we believe that the commissioner and the police superintendent-in-chief have responded, and I think in a very positive way, and they're dealing with it.
It is an existential issue, specifically in terms of the making of this video. But over the last couple of years, these racial assaults upon black people have been rising. We look at Boston Latin School a couple of years ago where young girls were protesting about being treated unfairly on racial terms. You look at the issue around racial name-calling at Fenway Park. Just earlier this year, Michael Shea, the Saturday Night Live comedian, calls Boston the most racist city that he's ever been in the country. So there is this layering effect that really sort of surfaces a subterranean boil of racial animosity within Boston generally. It's a good thing that the mayor has a couple weeks ago announced another tour of racial talks, because Boston certainly needs it.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Kevin Peterson of the New Democracy Coalition and Darnell Williams of the Urban League. Darnell, when I looked at the clip, I quickly made an assumption that reflected pretty badly on the police department, of course, but on the other hand, since we don't really know yet who generated this, who produced it, whether any police officer even approved it, is it maybe too soon to start saying that we're really worried about some widespread problem?
Well, I think it is. I think what we have to do is we have to recognize that we saw that they were in a police cruiser. We don't know if that's a Boston police cruiser. We don't know who shot it, who ordered it. We know that it was distributed to other officers. One of the officers happened to be an African American. And so we do know those facets of it. And as a former fire commissioner and disciplining firefighters, one of the things that you do, or what you learn to do, is not to jump to conclusions. Let the investigation take its course. We're watching, we're going to monitor it, and we're going to hold the people accountable. But I think that this is, if I were an African American and I would attach to a case with that particular officer, I would get a good lawyer, because I would say that we have some problems in Houston here with this particular officer.
Kevin, another possibility is that maybe somebody in the department was responsible for generating this, but you might say, well, if it's one person or two or three, it's an isolated, it's a rogue element, it's not a big picture problem, or is it?
Well, let's assume that that this did emanate from the Boston Police Department. If that's true, it is indicative of a culture within the Boston Police Department that's had a bad reputation for a long time in terms of hiring on the low and middle management levels in terms of police personnel, and has had a bad reputation among some sectors in the community where they have harassed people, or they definitely just have a negative perspective directed towards them because they're seen as intruders. So if you look at the larger culture in which this accusation is placed, you can fairly draw a conclusion that it might be part of the general culture of the Boston Police Department that needs to be fixed.
Darnell Williams, how do you fix a culture?
I think the key is that we have, I don't think this is just a solo issue for Boston. Boston has its storybook issues from 73 forward. So I don't have to go down that path because we know it all so well. But this is a national issue of race. So if I'm in Cleveland, if I'm in Baltimore, if I'm in Ferguson, I'm in Baltimore, I'm in DC or Detroit or Chicago, these issues play over and over and over again, and the results are the same. So when you say, how do we change the culture, we have to change the biases that are associated with the individuals who don't have a comfortable interface with the people they're supposed to protect and serve. So I'm not ready to to put a blanket over the entire department, because I know some police officers. My niece is a police officer. So I don't have any animus towards police officers. I have animus against police officers who cross the line and don't carry out the function of their duties. And it's our job, if we change the culture, is by constantly prodding, constantly advocating for justice for everybody. We don't want anything special. We don't want special treatment. We want to be treated fairly. People talk to you in certain ways when they approach the car, hand on the gun. I may have ran a yellow light. I didn't run a red light. But I understand the precautions, but we're treated in such a different way.
Stop and frisk. The ACLU study just a couple years ago showed that black boys across the city of Boston were disproportionately stopped on the streets, and maybe not for any legitimate reason than to surveil them. So I think a preponderance of events and a preponderance of administrative issues within the Boston Police Department, for me, indicates that there is a culture of racism. And that's not Mayor Walsh's, it doesn't originate from Mayor Walsh, because he didn't start racism. But Mayor Walsh is the mayor, and he has picked up the racial dog, for example, so he owns it. He said at the beginning of his administration that he would address the issues of racial divisions within the city. Now we have a very clear example, this incident, of what may be a systemic problem within a public institution, the police department, and he must take, I believe, a radical stance around ensuring that it's eliminated.
And I don't give a fuck what Bill Cosby said, because the problem don't exist when Bill Cosby's dead. And I don't think the revelation from the supreme beings reside in a hiding out in Bill Cosby's head.
Well, let's continue our conversation on the breaking news and bring in our legal panel for a fair and balanced discussion. Criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Bob Bianchi and trial attorney Nicholas Fortuna joins us now. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Bob, I want to start with you because we had heard now that the district attorney plans to retry this case, and I just want to first ask you, what is he up against?
I'm sorry, can you say that again, please?
I want to ask you what the DA is up against if he tries to retry this case.
Well, listen, the inertia, the ball is rolling downhill. As a prosecutor, you never want to retry a case. It's as simple as that. You have the burden of proof. You have to prove it to 12 jurors beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense now knows your prosecution strategy. They have transcripts for all the witnesses that testified. So if you can imagine that aggressive kind of cross-examination that occurred in this trial, you can only imagine what it's going to look like when they have the transcripts from the trial. So the inertia is really, really tough for the prosecutor in this kind of case to retry it and get a conviction, in my opinion.
Nicholas, I want to bring you in because we heard from Gloria Allred. She held a press conference. She had two alleged victims with her, and she had said what she took issue with in this particular trial is that there was 13 women that she wanted to testify, and only one was able to do so. Now, whether or not that was because the statute of limitations is way beyond my pay grade, but I want to ask you, if those women weren't allowed to testify, is it a possibility that we could see them in the future, and would that change the outcome?
It could change the outcome if you have more people piling on, accumulating evidence about the fact that Bill Cosby committed certain acts. However, I would say it's very, very dangerous for the judge to allow that kind of testimony. The appellate courts don't like prior bad acts coming in to influence what happened in this particular case. If you look at the testimony, Kelly Johnson testified that Bill Cosby had attacked her, and has nothing to do with what happened to Andrea Constant. Now, if they allow more victims to testify, it's likely...
But from a prosecutor's standpoint, you want that even if it doesn't have anything to do with your case, am I right?
Elizabeth, as a prosecutor, I got to tell you, I agree with what he's saying. There's an evidence rule, 404. I hate to get technical about it, but in court, you can only introduce that kind of evidence if it's relevant to something other than bad character, or that if you did this before, you must have done it here. That's exactly the reason you're not allowed to admit it, because they don't want to have multiple trials within trials. So as a prosecutor, when I've had 404 evidence that gets admitted, like was done in this case with one witness, you have to be very careful that you don't pile on bad character evidence, and then in the appeal, the courts look at it and say, The jury was given so much data about bad character that they did not or were unable to assess this particular case, as opposed to being poisoned by all of the other witnesses. So this judge and prosecutor were using restraint by not putting all of them on in order to protect a conviction. I know the public may not like to hear that, but you can imagine you don't want to be in a courtroom at a trial, or anybody would be in a courtroom, and having everybody come in for your entire life and say bad things about you.
A prosecutor's still going to try, though.
Yep, I wouldn't. And by the way, there's a precedent set in this case. The judges already ruled to what extent they're going to be allowed to introduce that evidence. So I think the prosecutor, they could certainly make the argument, but I think it will fail. There's a principle in the law where they say once a judge has made a decision in one part of a case, you're not going to relitigate it at another trial. So I don't think that they're going to be more.
But from a defense standpoint, she had also said, listen, it's way too early for Bill Cosby to be celebrating, and I want to bring you in, Nicholas, because it's really he wasn't acquitted.
Yeah, I agree with that. He wasn't convicted, which is better. I would really like to know what the count was. How many people were for conviction? How many people were against conviction? That's a big factor in a prosecutor determining whether or not they should retry a case. If they convinced 11 jurors, but there was only one holdout, that would lead towards a retrial, and the converse is true. I would say it's really problematic for a prosecutor to bring on prior accusations. I think most appellate courts would find it more prejudicial than probative, or it's not relevant to what happened in this particular case. They're going to find that the defendant was prejudiced by it and overturn it on appeal. I was surprised that the judge allowed that kind of testimony in this particular case. And you could tell this was not a good case for the prosecution, even with that testimony, and it weighs heavy on a jury that he committed these acts in the past. They still couldn't get a conviction.
Okay, let's start with you, Nicholas, because I want to focus a little bit on this jury pool and the fact that, yes, this was day 11, but it was day 6 of deliberations, and these particular jury members had gone back and forth to the judge at least 12 times, asking a number of questions. And I wanted to ask you, what, when you learned that they were going back and forth to the judge, asking very specific questions, meaning the definition of reasonable doubt, the definition of without her knowledge, what did that tell you when you heard they were asking those questions?
It reflects a debate among the jurors. So there's a difference of opinion between the jurors as to what, a particular charge meant, or what was said, or the impression of what was said during testimony. So it gets to a point where they can't resolve it within the jury room. They come back and ask for it to be read, or ask for an explanation from the judge. So you could tell right from the beginning that these jurors weren't seeing the case the same way. There was a debate. We just don't know how many people were on each side of that debate.
Okay, but I want to get Bob's reaction, because, Bob, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was split 50-50. There could be one person who was hung up on one thing.
Absolutely. We just don't know right now. It's likely, given the magnitude of this case, that we will find that out. But if you've been doing this as long as I have, what was very clear to me is that they're asking for copious readback. As a prosecutor, this is getting you nervous. You're like, wow, they don't remember the testimony. They're asking for instructions on the law. When this was going on, I said, we are just 1 second away from the ultimate bad question for the prosecution. Can you please redefine reasonable doubt? It was very clear that this jury was putting a lot of time and attention. Maybe there was one juror, maybe there were 7 jurors, who knows now. But it was very clear to me that they were challenging the facts, they were challenging the law, and when they asked for reasonable doubt, it was clear to me it was at a minimum a mistrial, and that's exactly what happened. This prosecutor's case was not well received by this jury in terms of them believing guilt, all 12 of them, beyond a reasonable doubt based on all of that.
Right.
Nicholas, let's talk a little bit about what Mr. Cosby was charged with in this case. There's been 60 women who have accused him in one way or another of sexual assault, almost all of those cases involving the use of some type of sedatives that were given to these women. But in this case, he's charged with 3 counts. Aggravated indecent assault, because Mr. Cosby allegedly used his fingers to have sexual contact with the victim. Count 2, aggravated indecent assault, because the victim was allegedly unconscious or semi-conscious and could not give consent. Count number 3, Cosby gave her an intoxicant that substantially impaired the victim. Hung jury on all 3 of those. Very specifically, what did the prosecution have to prove? What did they fail to prove in this?
Well, a couple of things. I think that there was inconsistency in her reporting of the crime or the alleged crime. There was inconsistencies with her behavior and the allegations that occurred here. She spoke to him or had telephone calls with him some 72 times after the alleged incident. That says a lot to a jury. That indicates that, you know, this is not a person who might have not been attacked. You know, that circumstantial evidence that something else was going on between them at the time. The other issue is when she was giving the drugs, did she consent to take the drugs? Because, you know, what happens after that not necessarily is considered, you know, that she couldn't give consent, I'm sorry, but they have to look at what she was thinking at the time when she took the drugs.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Saturday, June 17th, 2017. So I have been told this is our weekly compensatory call-in. Dial in if you have thoughts, commentary, counter-racist suggestions you would like to share. The number 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press *6 if you would like to participate. Number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press *6 if you would like to participate. Before we get started, we are listener-supported, counter-racist radio. Invest if you think the program is constructive. Racism-notes.blogspot.com. Racism-notes.blogspot.com. Listener-supported, counter-racist radio. When you hit the blog, look in the right corner. You will see the button for our PayPal. If you are not into PayPal, drop us an email. We will get you a physical mailing address. Make sure you verify the correct address, just making sure I did move at the beginning of the year. Make sure folks have the correct mailing address. Sincere, huge thanks to all of the many folks who have supported us 8+ years. I hope the broadcast has been, continues to be worthy of your time and energy. Thanks to all the folks who have got us items from our wish list as well. Huge thanks. Just got my copy of Dr. Tommy Curry's The Man Knot. Just got it. It was on my wish list earlier this week, and I just got it in the mail yesterday. I'm very much excited. Dr. Curry will be back with us a week from Monday, not this coming Monday, but the last Monday in June. He will be with us. The last Tuesday. It's the 27th. The 27th, he'll be with us at the end of the month to discuss his new book and give his views on racism, white supremacy. Always great to hear from Dr. Curry, but I will be prepped thanks to the items from my wish list. A couple quick things before we get started in the wish list at Amazon.com under Gus T Renegade, also linked at the blog. A couple quick things before we get started. Thomas in New York, he shared for a number of years now, giving us different updates and what have you on the broadcast. Last week, at the very end of the news segments on the compensatory call-in, I played a segment where it was a report on a group of officers, four officers in Jersey City, New Jersey, and there was a high-speed chase where the vehicle that they were chasing ended up catching on fire. It was a big blaze. They had video of this. It was just crazy. And there was a bystander who they stomped on him, just totally brutalized and terrorized this person who apparently didn't do anything, was not, under suspicion of any criminal activity, just happened to be at the scene, where all this went down. And so they got that on video too, of them stomping and kicking on this person. And so Thomas in New York, this was reported. This was in the news. I played a segment. Thomas in New York had said that he had observed some of the happenings in this case. And so he said he was going to give us an update. He wasn't able to share during the broadcast, but he said he'd be willing to drop an email and share details. So this is what he wrote in. He said, I could not call in last Saturday. This is the follow-up to the cover-up. Thanks for playing the clip. I try to participate in every Saturday program. I don't do workplace racism because this is just racism, what I deal with at the hospital, not workplace racism. I will tell the report if you still want. The cops were in pursuit of a suspect involved in a robbery. This is what they were leaving out about the case. The car they were chasing was white, but the car they were initially looking for was white. The cop pursued the wrong car and tried to pull it over. However, the driver didn't stop and the police gave chase. Mind you, even though the car did not stop, that warranted a police chase. The cop in pursuit knew that he was chasing the wrong car. She was not suspended. When asked why she started pursuing the wrong colored car, she said she was bored. Now, they are chasing this car and even shooting at the car. For context, the law in Jersey City, cops can only chase cars at 25 miles per hour speed, regardless of how fast the vehicle in pursuit is going. This is because of the 90s car stealing era, when cops in pursuit and car thieves trying to get away would frequently cause accidents and they would hit innocent people. So the cops lost the car. The car they were chasing hits another car and the cars burst into flames. The innocent man who was just driving to work catches on fire in the accident. Then you saw the video, and again, they have video of this. You can look online. I heard all this play out on the emergency room cops walkie-talkie. This is where I step in. That male who was burning was brought into the hospital in handcuffs. He was not treated properly. Now, they brought both drivers in, and they said they were in the car together, even though it was clear as day over the walkie-talkie they were in pursuit of and shooting at a car with a single driver. An accident is trauma, however. Any severe burning victim is supposed to go straight to the Hackensack Hospital or Beth Israel Newark. The Jersey City Medical Center is a trauma hospital for everything but burns. But because this innocent man was brought in as a criminal, he was not sent where he should have been. Then the fire department chief came in over the walkie-talkie. It's 2 cars, not one. One driver is innocent, all in quotes. That's when all the captains and sergeants came in yelling and screaming, begging the doctors to keep the man alive, opposite of how he was being treated, with burns over 75% of his body and handcuffed to a bed, and coaching the cops in pursuit of how to write their paperwork. But none of that is in the paper or in the news. They could have and should have treated the man at the proper hospital like a human, not a nigger. Also left out is the other man, the guy who they were chasing. He had no burns, but he was shot once, and they claimed he shot himself with a gun they found at the scene. The fact that this man was shot was left out of every report I saw. Let's not forget, essentially, this was also an innocent man. This is all reported from Thomas in New York. They have updates online. I'll post some of the articles about this incident so you can read and see for yourself. You can even see some of the video footage from this. Again, just the importance of being alert. And again, like I say, you never know. The system of racism, white supremacy is constant warfare. One of the people in this was not doing anything, just happened to be out and about, minding his own business, and then all of this happens and you get caught up in it. That is the system of racism, white supremacy. So one of the reasons why I say sobriety would be best, stay alert, be attentive to what's happening around you. I even, discourage when people go out. I know it's been fashionable for some time for people to wear like pajamas and footies and that sort of thing. System of white supremacy. This is war. Anytime that it could happen in your residence, but certainly if you're going to go outside, you're going even for something minor, you're just going to make a quick run to the bank or the post office or something. Even then, be alert. Remember, you are a victim of white supremacy. Racists are constantly looking for victims. Keep that in mind. That's unfortunate, but that is what the system of white supremacy means. Now, next thing I wanted to get to. Thanks to all the folks who contributed and submitted news items for the compensatory call-in this week and last week, and really every week. 'Cause like I said, most weeks a lot of different people contribute news items, videos, that sort of thing on a regular basis. But we had lots of participation, and I think the bulk of the news segments from this week were from listeners. I added like one or two. I knew I was going to put something in with the Bill Cosby just to give an update on what was happening with the trial. But other than that, most of what you heard this week was from listener submissions. Again, huge thanks to all the folks for that. I did not include, even though I did have a number of great submissions about the London fire, I did not include the fire at Grenfell Tower, where at least 30 people have been reported dead so far. I did not include anything about that today because we will more than compensate over the next 48 hours. For one, our global Sunday talk on racism will be tomorrow. That is Sunday, early time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, 12 noon Pacific. We'll have our listeners from across the globe. They'll be with us. We obviously have had a lot of Black British listeners for some time, for years. And a good number of them, they will be with us tomorrow. So we'll have a lot of information about the Grenfell Tower fire and how this impacted Black Britons. You had a disproportionate number of Black people living in this area impacted by the fire. So we'll talk about it tomorrow with them. And on Monday, folks recall from 2 weeks ago, we had the segment from the BBC, The Big Questions. And one of their questions for that week was, can white people be victims of racism? And they had two of our previous guests on the program. One of them was Dr. William Les Henry. He's been a guest on the program repeatedly. The other was Esther Stanford Kosei. She's been with us also numerous times on the program. She'll be back with us this coming Monday. Will be grand to speak with her, have her back on the broadcast. It has been a considerable number of years since we've heard from her, but she also will be touching on the Grenfell Tower fire. The election that just went down, Theresa May struggling a bit in her bid for re-election. And she also had some other interesting issues that she wanted to touch on with the work that she does around reparations for Black people globally. So that'll be Monday. Tune in. And like I said, fire can certainly be brought up today. I know people were aware of it, so if people want to talk about it, that's cool. But we will be all into that tomorrow and again on Monday. Next thing. As I just mentioned, Global Sunday Talk on Racism will be here tomorrow. Make sure folks tune in. Be looking forward. If you have questions you want to ask victims of racism, non-white people in different parts of the world, take advantage. With that, I will pause here and see if we have commentary from our listeners. The number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564-943#. Press *6 if you would like to participate. I will state just for this program, don't do this for any other broadcast, specifically for the compensatory call-in, if I could request no metaphors. It's been my experience frequently, racists, they will use metaphors to practice racism, to be deceivers. That is a part of their master deception package. They will use similes, analogies. They will make comparison between things that are not equivalent. They do this regularly, and it confuses a lot of non-white people. Victims of racism, we pick up a lot of racists' habits, and also we are still learning. Gus T Renegade included. Since we have not come to conclusions on everything as it relates to racism and counter-racism, we are still trying to figure some things out. Sometimes we will employ a metaphor to convey our thoughts, hoping that it will accurately convey what it is that we want to say about racism or what have you. But a lot of times, these analogies and comparisons, they just promote a lot of confusion. They're not accurate. If we could just be direct, explicit, clear with what it is that we're trying to say, that would be great. I will prompt about that for this program today. With that, if folks could take about 5 minutes to share whatever comments, ideas, suggestions that you have. If you could take 5. That way everybody gets at least one opportunity to speak. And then once everybody has spoken once, then if you have additional comments, questions, we can, get that in as well. If you know you are in a noisy environment, if you could use your mute button, that would be super appreciated. Helps preserve the quality of the broadcast. Just unmute yourself when you're ready to speak. If you can kind of get to a quieter area, say whatever it is you're going to say. And then once you're done, if you can mute that line, great. That way we don't pick up every extra conversation and whatever you happen to be watching on television. Grand. All that said, we'll go ahead and get to the first few folks who called in. Line should be open. Feel free.
Can I be heard? Hello?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Yes, this is Big Victim from Birmingham, Alabama. I'd like to share an incident that happened to me in my NA group. I recently tried to share with my sponsor that my problem that I have, it was due to racism, white supremacy. I shared that with him, and he got real nasty with me. He told me he didn't want to hear it. He's black. He's a victim. He said we hold the meetings in the church. He said, do not bring that mess up in this church, and blase. And I said, excuse me for that. No metaphors. He just went on a tirade about discussing that, and I said, "This is what bothers me now. This is I just sat in the meeting and I heard him talk about from having relations with animals, anything you want to put your mind to. I heard it up in that meeting, but if I want to sit up and I want to talk about racism, it's a problem." Any input would be, I'm sitting up here thinking I should just drop him as my sponsor because I feel like I can't share with him my major problems. Any input would be, I would be grateful. Thanks for letting me share.
I guess, folks, as we proceed with, as people share, if they want to add or suggestions, since you're asking for input, so if they have suggestions or recommendations on how to proceed, people can share that as we proceed through all of the callers. My quick suggestion, number one, definitely commendation for making that effort to remain sober. That is important. I think on Thursday when you brought this up originally, I think you were saying then that can't be a job for some people, remaining sober. Absolutely. And racists do a great job with that, keeping us stressed, and then making sure that there are lots of narcotics readily available throughout the plantation. My suggestion, not being surprised at victims of racism who shut down conversations on racism. The person, you said was a black person who said, don't bring that mess up in the church. And, we're not about all that. You said you patiently kind of listened to them talk about all kinds of other just absurd things in, your group or what have you. And this is an important part of your recovery. I think that would probably be the better goal because if the system of white supremacy and your mistreatment, if that is a central aspect of why you consume your substance abuse issue, then you're going to need to address that, and you're going to need a support system and people working with you in your recovery who support that, not people who are telling you to shut up and, you can't talk about that, and, we got to talk about other things than, your issue with racism. That's, in my view, that's going to really compromise the effectiveness of your treatment. So yeah, I would say, and I would just ask questions. If other people, same thing we do with the workplace racism, I would ask questions. What specifically is the reason? Do we think that racism is not a problem? Do we think that racism shouldn't be talked about in the church? Because it seems like a lot of, preachers, that was the thing that they did. In fact, that was the thing that they said there should be more of. I know at least one, Dr. King, said a lot of that. And it seems like, a lot of people have great admiration for the work he did. I would just go right down the line and ask more questions in terms of why we can't talk about this. Do you think this is not a factor in alcoholism for me? And then you can even extrapolate out to other black people. folks can give their response as we go down the line to give input. Other people who dialed in, if you have suggestions, commentary that you want to share, if we have not heard from you, line should be open. Proceed.
Yes, may I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Greetings, Gus, and to the rest of the callers. So, just based on one of the audio clips from before, just the one set place in one of these universities where a white student chased a black student with a noose, just that particular one, I just felt like it felt like that particular thing was interesting to me because, well, for one, I agree with the mother of the black student. That white student should have been charged with more, consequential crimes than he was charged. Because, I mean, for one, you're threatening a student's life. I'm not sure if it was near campus or not, but I feel like the principal or the dean of the university should have been involved with this as well, and also the police, because this is like a very serious thing. I mean, a lot of people don't notice it, but I for sure do notice it. But just based off of that, I also just felt like I remember either the mother or the student stated that they were scared due to this. I mean, what I'm saying is it's perfectly fine to be scared at that moment because I'm pretty sure that's never happened to him before. That's just like the first time he's ever been chased by a noose, if I am correct. But they can't be scared for the rest of their lives. They have to put action to this. And that further relates to how I was thinking and how my mother was talking to me about how parents should be teaching their children about this particular situation, how they have to prepare for this as they progress through school. Like in high school or college, they really have to expect white people to be crafty or sketchy because they're like that. And also middle school and below, because it can happen any time. There's no telling what these white parents are teaching their children. So, yeah, I just felt like that kind of related to that particular situation. And, yeah, I just find it quite interesting what's going on in the world, especially towards education in schools, because I just feel like we as a society should be taught about this more often. Like we can't be blind towards this. Like you stated before, we are in a war, and we can't just act like we're not. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for taking my call.
Our young scholar in the Bay Area, always good to hear commentaries. He has a lot of times he'll write in his commentary, and we'll just read his comments on the air. This time called in. Very good to hear from you, sir. Other folks who dialed in, if you have a hand up, if you have commentary, line should be open. Feel free.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Oh, hey, good evening, Gus. Good evening to all panelists. Just a couple of things. The loving segment, of course, the person who did that segment just continued to talk about the impact this had, you know, how this is such a great love story, not dealing how Richard Loving preyed on an 11-year-old girl. You know, that is just ignored. And then to hear that person talk about how interracial marriage is viewed more differently now. It is, as to say that it is more accepting. Well, even though he is not married, I'm pretty sure the black male from Bachelor in Paradise, Demario Jackson, is not thinking that right now. After his sexual encounter with white Corinna Olympios, And interesting about that was she didn't even make the charge at first. It was the other white people that produced the show. They're the ones that said he took advantage of this innocent girl. And of course she decided to go with it. So I'm pretty sure he's not thinking that interracial relationships are so good right now. And the segment on the black ladies who are constantly getting subjected to racism because of their hair. As I said before, it's these women aren't committing any crimes. These women aren't being abrasive or doing anything wrong. They're just wearing their hair the way they want to wear it. And for this to be such an issue, it just goes to show what we as black people are up against. And when the person mentioned Zendaya Coleman, who was 18 at the time she was attacked by Juliana Rancic, who I believe was practicing racism at the time. She mentioned how Zendaya was 18, but Juliana Rancic at the time was 40 years old. Now, this is really heinous for a 40-year-old woman to attack an 18-year-old over wearing her hair, particularly when this same 40-year-old white woman basically wanted everybody to be sympathetic towards her on her fight against breast cancer and how she was struggling to have children. But all the sensitivity that she wanted, she couldn't apply it to an 18-year-old girl, to an 18-year-old. You know. Oh, and I don't know if any of the other callers discussed this, but the Alexandria GOP baseball shooting by James Hodgkinson, I'm asking everybody, did any of you, even though this was political violence, did any of you hear this referred to as terrorism? Did any of you hear James Hodgkinson referred to as a terrorist? Because I certainly didn't. I looked several articles online. Not one of them referred to him as a terrorist. Oh, no, I take that back. Only one person called what he did an act of terror. That was, of all people, late-night comic Steve Colbert. And also, the black police officers, Bradley and Griner, who killed this white terrorist. I also don't recall them getting a standing ovation from Congress people, the way the cops who gunned down non-crime committing Miriam Carey were applauded. I just wanted to make those points, and thank you.
Appreciate that, M1. Yeah, I did not hear the shooter of Representative Scalise and the other representatives, politicians in Virginia. I do not recall that being referenced as an incident of terrorism or Hodgkin being referenced as a terrorist or having committed an act of terror. Nothing of the sort. I did not hear any of that. Even heard some commentary that sounded like they were leaning into, this is a poor, aggrieved white man who was with Bernie Sanders and just wanted to be part of the revolution. Down and out, poor, trampled, white working class type narrative. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary, if we have not heard from you, your line should be open. Feel free. See, other folks who do have a hand up, line should be open.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Hey, good evening. Caller 2812 from Virginia. I'm going to try to be concise. Today I'm not commenting specifically on the clips, but today I emailed Gus a little bit earlier. I was able to visit a Juneteenth celebration that was here in the part of Virginia, locally at Montpelier. Hope I'm saying that correctly. Where James Madison, racist white supremacist, this plantation is open, and I went there, being reminded of how Gus said sometimes when you go to places you should do it as an experiment, and so I actually went there as like a person asking questions as a reporter, representing myself, and I went there with a list of questions, and I really had some really good conversations with victims of racism and made some observations, so I'm going to try to share them as quickly as possible. A couple of the questions that I asked was, what is the purpose of this event? Do you have a functional or just a general definition of racism? Would you consider James Madison a racist white supremacist? If they answered the next question. And then who is most confused about racism? But before I got into those questions, the first 5 minutes that I got there, I could already tell there was going to be massive confusion. So they do what's called libation. I'm not familiar with the process, but they were doing like a libation ceremony that was dedicated to like the ancestors. And anyone that is going to these southern plantations should be aware that the majority of these events or even these venues are attended by people who classify themselves as white. They're all white people. Today it was a little bit more balanced. I'd maybe say 60% white, 40% black. So they're doing this ceremony. They've got black people, victims of racism, walking around in African garb with drums. And literally, they are singing songs and stuff like that. And so the guy, he takes out a water pitcher. I'm not familiar with the ceremony. He takes out a water pitcher and he says, I want everyone to say names of the ancestors who have fallen and who have fought for our liberation. Now, mind you, I just said that there's 60% white people, and these white people start saying the names of just people in general. And I'm sitting there saying, I thought this guy was talking about ancestors of people that have fought basically against racism, white supremacy. So people are saying names or whatever and stuff like that. And so then the non-white woman gets up there and starts talking about the ancestors, because I believe she's related to some of the slaves that are actually buried on this plantation. Keep that in mind. So the first thing she says is they were brought here. And myself and another woman look at each other, and I'm like, oh, man, this is just going to be a lot of inaccurate words. So that was the first thing. So then they all start walking back towards the plantation, towards another place where they were going. And there's a woman that I've met there, victim of racism. She's a teacher, but she's very educated, less confused. And she walks over to the grave site, and she says, you know, I visited this plantation on numerous occasions, and I don't remember this grave site looking this bad and trashy. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. She said, before, they had like little pillars or just things, headstones or whatever, you know, they were acknowledging that these people were buried here. And she said, now this looks like they got poison ivy covering everything. I mean, it was just tacky and trashy. So we're walking up the hill, and I just said to her, the rest of the plantation doesn't look like this. She said, you're right. And I said, would you agree that white people could fix it, but they just don't? And she just started laughing. And I said, she said, you're right. And I said, there we go. So I'm going to share a little bit more later, but when I got to asking the questions for the victims, the questions I mentioned earlier, the first two people that I was able to interview was a black male, older black male, and a younger black male. And the most interesting question that I asked today, I've asked 6 people, but the first 2 people was, do you have a definition of racism? And I stole that directly from Gus. I stole that directly from Mr. Fuller, because if you don't have a definition, people are confused and you don't really know what you're talking about. And when I asked that question to anybody, specifically black people, I didn't get a chance to interview white people, specifically black people, a lot of them thought about the question. Like, really took some time. Like, I've never even thought about that. But when some of them gave their answers, you got a lot of black people can be racist, prejudice, everything. And it was just a lot of confusion. And my brain starts like, man, I wonder how I found it before I started listening to the cows and just reading Mr. Fuller's book. But I'll end with this. The older gentleman, when I asked him who's most confused about racism, even after saying all this stuff about prejudice and black people can be racist and, we're all in this together, I said, well, who's the most confused about racism? And he said, black people are most confused. And in my brain, I was like, what? I said, really? And I said, why do you say that? He said, because we are victims. And I just got up and started laughing. And we had a good little chuckle, a good little giggle. It was really, really constructive. And if I have a little bit more time, I'll share more about a couple of the other victims and people I was able to talk to with some of my observations. But even then, with all those people saying all these different terms, at the end of the day, he still said non-white people are the most confused about racism because we're victims. And Mr. Fuller always says that even when people deny that racism, white supremacy is a problem, it always comes back. So that's all I got. I'll share a little bit later, Gus, if we have some more time. Thanks.
Carry me back to old Virginia. That is great. Great times at Mount Pelion. We'll be looking forward to additional commentary. Say that regularly. You can use local history to be more informed about racism and just to learn things in general. And use that as a way to inform yourself and people in your family as well. But that's great. Get your questions prepped in advance that you want to ask. And sometimes it is as simple as that. If we weren't victims, maybe we wouldn't be so confused. But generally speaking, being a victim, being confused, poorly informed is going to be a big aspect of your victimization, generally speaking. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary, if we have not heard from you at all, line should be open. Proceed. Seems like we have some hands up, and either people are waiting or maybe they're not in an area where they can speak. I think the people who do have hands up, line should be open. We miss folks.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. Greetings to Gus, the host, the listeners and callers. There was some parts of the audio segment that stood out tremendously, especially the terminology. I think there was maybe a couple of months ago that there was a segment where that term, ethnic intimidation, I think was used, and I believe it's some type of, charge when someone's committed or has committed a crime. And I think it was for one of those segments where the suspected racist teenager, took some type of, noose out of his pickup truck. And what was interesting was that it appeared to be that, there's some sort of surveillance footage, like some type of evidence. And, I'm not sure if this person was charged or whatnot. And, because I know it was maybe 2 or 3 different clips with the in the area of education where these things are happening at the schools. And the black male, that was just profound when he was like, hey, he just followed the logic when I think he said this. He said, they don't care, basically just put it out there. And, very direct language. They don't care. I think they don't care. It was something like that he said. And I don't think he got a response to that. even though it may have come off as a statement, but I thought I was very, honest and just truthful. But it's definitely terrorism. And when it comes to that term terrorism, I didn't hear that word referred to the person they call the gunman, the white person. And, they was saying, well, hey, he was a Democrat and GOP, basically trying to use those type terms right there. I think that just basically caused more confusion. And as far as the segment where I guess it was the couple, where they were saying like they couldn't go out and I guess be comfortably received, I guess, by people. But see, the thing is when they say, well, I guess the white person saying what she experiences is, if, like her family or her father saying that she couldn't, don't ever marry a black guy or whatever. But, the reasons were different, basically. The black person was saying, don't, like his family was telling them don't get with those white women, because of the consequences. And it's justifiably understandable that you wouldn't, because, there's still a power difference between the two groups. So it's, they can't really utilize that to say that racism is coming from black people. And I think that clip definitely tried to put that confusion out there. And, one last thing was when I think the pastor from Texas was talking about, I guess, some kind of revolution he was proposing, and they pretty much refused it. They ended up saying, because I think the term white nationalism was used, he was basically focusing on that and the alt-right. But I think the person in the segment was saying that they ended up, I guess, rejecting racism in all of its forms. Like, that's a phrase that's been used as well. Because he didn't say, racism in all its forms. He said white nationalism. And people don't never really go into what that means when they say racism in all forms. So I guess that's just how they had to address his request when that was brought up. And that's all I have for now, and thanks for allowing me to speak.
Yeah, that is a great tactic, the use of that phrase, racism in all its forms. I think a lot of times they're trying to use that to suggest that white people are victims of racism. You got some black people that, practice a form of racism too now. They are really creative with that sort of deception. And at least in my view, they're similar to, if folks remember the clip from this week on the where they talked to the quote-unquote interracial couple, incorrect word there, and they were talking about how, I think with the person doing the interview, he said it was a black male, white woman. He said both of their families opposed them getting together, right? As though black people are racist too. Black people, oh yeah, don't be marrying no cracker. But then when he explained, he said the black guy, his family said, oh man, don't bring any white girl home. They end up lynching you for that. That's not, oh man, we're racist. That's not, we don't like crackers. That is, whoa, there's a history of us being terrorized as a result of some white person lying or anything that is associated with a black person and a white person. Maybe they went out or dated or looked like or anything of that nature. That's totally, totally different from this white woman, race soldier, her and her family saying, oh no, we don't allow you to date niggers. We don't tolerate here in this part of Virginia. That's not the same at all. And to just put that together like that, whites, they do that sort of thing. And I'm not even sure if it was a white person doing the interview, so I can't say that. But I would say under the system of white supremacy, they are most responsible for why you would have wording like that and why that is almost predictably the way that people talk about racism, that everybody is racist, everybody has a little prejudice. They'll switch the words up, as you all stated before, prejudice or discrimination. You really have to be mindful about that. It shows how bad the confusion and contamination is. Other folks we haven't heard from?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings, Gus, and greetings to all the callers and listeners. I think the first clip that you played in regards to non-white people migrating to Europe due to the fact that colonization has taken over certain parts of Africa and the Middle East kind of reminds me of the Great Migration, or the not-so-great migration that happened here in the early part of the 20th century, from black people basically escaping terrorism from the South. So kind of similar incident there. The education piece in regards to majority white people, particularly white females in the education system, educating schools that are mostly black. Kind of interesting here in Illinois. They had a lot of, a couple of years ago, there was a lot of programs here that were open to people who wanted to become teachers. And some years ago, there were a bunch of white female teachers that entered the program at some of the local universities here, kind of like a certification class to get your, to teach in Illinois. But then as more black people started entering the program, all of a sudden these programs stopped. All of a sudden money stopped. There was no money for the program, and they shut down a lot of these teacher certification programs here. So as more black people tried to become teachers, less money started going into the program. And two, one last thing. I was at the, I think I sent you something a couple of months ago about there's a church here, Hartsdale Baptist Church, that were doing like a thing on racism. And there was one last week in regards to, the title of it was called The Biblical and Theological Framework of Dismantling Racism. It was interesting. I know I went last time I went. I thought it was okay. This session was okay too. Now, they are very much versed into the teachings of Dr. Francis Relsing and Neely Fuller, because everybody who presented always gave their definition of racism. And so, it's something that, I've learned from this program and from Dr. Welsing, as reading Dr. Welsing as well, that, you always give your definition of racism so you can present. But what was interesting is that I connected, there was a topic that they talk about that you played on one of the clips about the Southern Baptist Conference, and they referenced the curse of Ham. And I don't understand why people don't say that's basically a misnomer, because in the Bible, it wasn't Ham that was cursed. It was Canaan that was cursed. So white people would never say that, because they were the ones that kind of like made it up. So it was interesting. In regards to the conference too, not a lot of, solutions, but it was interesting because of the fact that they basically went down the road of how white people use Christianity to enforce, racist ideas, in particular the white Jesus, and whitening up a lot of the church fathers, and basically kind of changing a lot of the culture of Christianity into white European culture. So, like I said, it was interesting in regards to the history of it, but as long as people are talking about it and trying to come up with solutions, I'm kind of open to it. But that's all for now. I'm my
Appreciate that. The solutions.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir. We can hear you, Thomas, in New York.
Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry. I cut you off.
Solutions tend to be lacking. I was going to be right to the point and concise on that one. Solutions are often lacking from whites who allege they're trying to address racism. Good to hear from you, Thomas, in New York.
Good to hear from you, too. I would go a step further and say that the solutions are obsolete. They don't have any solutions. It's all how to keep it going, no solutions. Thank you for playing that. Bit of my piece there, Gus. Saved me doing a lot of talking. I just wanted to reiterate to everyone that 2 cars crash and the police pull up on the scene. They're chasing one of the cars, and a gentleman steps out and he's burning on fire. And the police start stomping this man out. They claim they're trying to put out the fire, but the first kick went to the man's head. And that's the man that they come to find out later, he wasn't even the person they were chasing. So, just packing this all the way around. The clip you played, I was traveling, so the first clip I heard was about Kendrick Johnson. And, what stood out to me in that clip is Millie Fuller always says the hardest thing to do is to prove racism. And the fact that they put that in their lawsuit, that, this was an act of racism, is pretty much the reason they're using for kicking that lawsuit out, because you cannot prove it. You can't prove it. I just hope they use better words for their next lawsuit. Do not use racism, because they're not going to be able to prove that at all. The beheading of the man down in I think it was Mississippi. I had spoke to Roz about this. I was telling him that, in my opinion, this is dark web activity, the dark internet. These rooms where you could go in and see a man get beheaded, see a kid get raped, see a black woman get raped and hung or whatever else they want to do. And in my opinion, that's when I heard the story, that's the first thing I thought of was the whole murder is probably on someone's server. They paid a lot of money to see it happen, and then they had to discard the body, and they do what they do best. To M1, he spoke earlier. He's generally the person that speaks about the black cops' different treatment when they shoot people as opposed to white cops. And one of the stories that you played before and he brought reference to before was Jersey City. I believe it was a Hudson County cop, which is Jersey City. But he was traveling in Maryland, I believe, and he got out the car because of some white terrorists chasing him down, and with his son. And the black cop had his family with him, and the black cop got out and shot the man and the son, and he was subsequently found not guilty. I do remember hearing that he lost his job. So a black attempted race soldier here at the plantation I'm at, he was making a joke about a young man who was killed, and I guess at the memorial, he said that it was about to be a riot, and he went over and he shut it down by telling them, it doesn't matter if I shoot another black person, I'm going to get off just like the white cops do, or something to that effect. So I say, yeah, it's funny you say that, and I brought up this story, and he had some in-depth knowledge of it. Oh, that's my man, and he said that they actually held a rally to get this guy his job back here. He has his job back now. So my question to him was, well, how many of the white cops attended? And he said very little. So here's just how they do. If this was a white cop, boy, everybody would have been out, money and everything. The Bill Cosby case. I remember the city that they're holding this city. I don't think it's in Philadelphia. I think it's like a suburban city to Philadelphia. I could be mistaken. But they were complaining about the amount of money they were spending on security and cops and all the overtime and block off streets and things. And here they're turning around now and they're already going forward with another trial in 320 days. So it must have not been that big of a deal with all the money spent if they're going to go right ahead with another trial so soon. Last thing I wanted to add, and I saw this as, in my opinion, this was black self-respect on display. The other day I took my daughter to the eye doctor, and I was on 125th Street in Harlem. And right across from the Apollo, where a lot of the YouTubers do their shooting, you know, of their little podcast videos on their station. So there was about 10 gentlemen sitting there trying to sell their CDs, you know, their rap CDs. And they came up to me, and I kind of, you know, told them I wasn't interested. And, you know, he was, you know, trying to explain, oh, these are all original tracks and this, that, and the other. And then I heard one of them yell, oh, they're getting out. So, man, this brother, he just ran. I mean, they just scattered. Like, it was almost like they had it all planned. And they crossed the street where the Apollo was. And I looked across the street, and I noticed that it was a college, Toro University. They were holding their graduation at the Apollo. And here comes all these white people, you know, coming out with their, you know, their caps and gowns and things. And these brothers proceeded to go over there and, you know, let them get an earful. And when I could kind of hear them yelling and calling, you know, names or whatever. So, you know, when my daughter came out the store, we went across the street to go to another. She got out the eye doctors. We went across the street to go into a store, and I could hear them a lot more clearly. And what they were doing is they was asking these white people questions, you know, and I thought that was very constructive. And they weren't being belligerent. And when the white people would not avoid answering the questions, that was when they would pretty much say, oh, you're a racist, you're, you know, crap or whatever. But they were asking them the same type of questions we would be asking on the cows. I thought it was so great to see how they were running across the street trying to get away from these brothers. It was just like, you know. But one of them went over and proceeded, you know, to tell my daughter that she was a queen and, you know, you don't never have to go work for these people. You know, he just gave a long speech, which I thought was, you know, very interesting. But I just like the fact that they challenged these people. And they said they do it every time they see them. And I thought that if that happened in Charleston, you know, we have 9 more black people here. You know, anytime you see these people, they should be questioned, especially when they're in our, you know, in our domain. And I'll mute my line. Thank you.
Always a big advocate of asking white people questions. Great strategy. I think we had a few folks this week report asking questions. Our listener in Virginia saying he got his questions together to go to the plantation, I guess, for a little summer outing, but make it constructive. Have some questions ready to ask the good white people in attendance. Other people who dialed in, if you have a hand up, line should be open. Other folks who dialed in, particularly if we have not heard from you.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Greetings to you, the hosts, the callers, and the listeners. This is Mhandisi. I wanted to respond to last week when I was speaking about how basically when white people, the people we're calling white, once they are genetically annihilated or extinct, could there be white supremacy? I believe the firefighter or retired firefighter responded and was saying basically that this isn't a biological issue. So the people who classify as white, they're not like biologically, I guess, related. But I would say I would disagree with that if that's what he was saying. But I want to make it clear that this is absolutely a biological and a genetic issue. Now, there are some people who classify as white that are not the albinos of Europe, but the people who are functionally white are the albinos and the albinoid people coming out of Europe after the last ice age. And I do want to say that the first generation albinos from melanated people, they're not the individuals who are perpetuating the system that we are calling white supremacy. I also want to say that there's people who are classified as white that are not functionally white. For instance, the Moors have been classified in certain documents, have been classified as free white people, or free white persons. But what does that mean functionally? They're not white. They're not these creatures that are causing the problem. I also want to say, if there's no white people, then there's no white supremacy. So, and as Dr. Francis Welsing have been saying, their concern is genetic annihilation, which means absolutely this is a genetic issue, which means we can identify these people based on their phenotype. The genotype dictates the phenotype. That's how we can identify who the people are. But if the main concern is their genetic annihilation, then that's what we need to be mainly concerned about. Either how do we genetically annihilate, how do we help them get to their extinction level, or what should we do? What do we do about these people? What is their consequence for invading and killing our people? What is the consequence that we give to these people? And I say one solution is that we stop calling them white. And I mentioned that to one of the speakers of Hidden Colors when he came to my city. He sat down he had dinner with me, my mother, and several of my associates. And I was explaining to him, I recognize that some of the speakers on this Hidden Colors franchise aren't identifying these creatures as white. And I was telling him, but if we did a concerted effort, if all of the speakers decided not to call them white, we can end the system in one generation to where there's no more white people. And he may have implemented that in Hidden Colors 3. But the reason I say that is because if we are focused on their genetic makeup, then we're identifying who these people actually are. White people is so ambiguous. It is a social construct to some degree because so many people are classifying as white, but that's just hiding who the white people, who the ice albinos are, who the albino and albinoid people of Europe after the last ice age is hiding who they are. But if we can identify the problem, we can solve the problem. And I say again, we absolutely have to solve this problem. I'm tired of these people. I'm absolutely tired of these people. They need consequences. Thank you.
Context of White Supremacy. Other folks that we've not heard from, if you have a hand up, lines should be open.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry about that. I had a delay, was in a bad area, but this is the Voice 305. I wanted to talk about the gentleman he touched earlier about the shooter. From what I heard, I haven't heard anybody talk about him as a terrorist villain. They more put him up in the limelight of being like a political victim, and him expressing his anger through violence was just a little concerning for them, and they wanted to really pamper him and, figure out what's going on. And you just see it all the time in this system. It becomes a norm, and I feel like everybody's desensitized to it. It's like we're desensitized toward white violence as being norm, like something concerning, and then black violence, we're desensitized as it always being something violent about us. So I really I looked at it in disgust and just turned the channel. You can also see how in the Comey versus Trump, they also had an article that was going around. I guess they were polling people, and there's so much on code that they're not even blaming Trump, and they're not even blaming Comey. They're blaming the media. So it just goes to show you, like, it don't matter what facts are out there. The whole deflection thing is just, we don't want whites to look like they're bad narrative. There was a clip that was talking about the constant disproportion of resources between whites and blacks. Like oh gosh, that's like a continuous lip service. It's just a continuous talk on and on about that. I mean, nobody from the dominant society isn't putting no effort in it. It's very blatant. It's very obvious. If they wanted to change it, they could change it. It just seems like a social topic, and they don't really care about it. So, I don't know. You just get frustrated with this constant talk. With the Philando Castile, his incident, that's nothing shocking. When you go back to the days of Andrew Johnson, he already laid out the blueprint for everything about how to control everything from the police system down to the court system, Congress, everything from all angles. He already said that plenty of times about that's how you control blacks, and that's how you eliminate white annihilation. And once you put that system and place that system on, you'll pretty much continue the white dominance. So he's been placed that in effect since the early 1800s. So that's nothing new to me. But I did want to say that I felt refreshed about how his mother came out and she did a video of black self-respect. She just went all out. She let them have it, you know. She just told the truth. Like, we need to wake up, and, you know, she had some explicitives that she put out there. I don't want to repeat, but she just had enough, just like everybody else. The Bill Cosby situation, I felt like the Bill Cosby, to me, this is just my perception, but to me, I feel like Bill Cosby is just going to be another O.J. Simpson. Anytime you have black men that beat the system like that, they're always going to try to find a way to come back and try to get you. If you listen to the clip that you played and how the commentator, he kept emphasizing on how, we need to find out how much jurors said yes and how much said no. So that would be a good indication to go after him again. So they're not going to stop till they get Bill Cosby on something. So he has to be squeaky clean from here on out, but they're not going to stop till they get him, just like how they got OJ. The Marvin Wright is a young student that was out in what high school that was? Southwest Edgecombe High School, and he did a speech, and I guess they wanted him to do the speech they wrote for him, but I mean, he was the president of the school, and it was his right. Every other president that I've seen of the school that go up there, they all had their own speech, but for some reason, they didn't want this particular black educated student to write his own speech, which I went on social media and I found a lot of people really said his speech was real good. But it just goes to show you that they don't want no type of shine. They don't want anything like that. And to hold his diploma for 2 days and then didn't even say sorry because he ended up doing his speech, it just goes to show you the tackiness. And it's bad. It's bad. But that's all I have. I'll mute my line.
Appreciate that. Even when it seems that you've graduated and done well academically, white people can still make problems for you. I think that might be another one. They might chalk that up to, we're not going to tolerate any uppityness, even at the finish line, for folks who think they're about to graduate. Just because you got your diploma doesn't mean we're going to tolerate any sass from any educated niggers. Do we have other folks, particularly if we have any people we've not heard from? You should speak now.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Howdy doody, everybody. It's Ken Steele, and I am calling from Chino Hills here in California. I hope everybody is doing as best as they can under these conditions of racism. This week was particularly tumultuous for many victims of racism. There was a lot of developments this week. The one that I see that most victims of racism seem to be reacting to in the last 48 hours has been the verdict in the case trying the suspected race soldier who went ahead and, in my opinion, murdered Philando Castile. And I think that this is a really, really interesting situation because for, like I've mentioned on previous broadcasts, for the past few months, the suspected racists or the racist white supremacists in control of the media have made a concerted effort to promote the procurement of concealed carry licenses and firearms for victims of racism. And so many of the arguments of the proponents of this push have been disproven by this case. I want to ask those people who are promoting gun ownership and, or rather increased gun ownership and increased procurement of these concealed carry permits, I want to ask them, what could Philando Castile have done to defend himself against this race soldier or suspected race soldier that would have resulted in him being able to safely come home and see his family? And I suspect the answer to that question is nothing. And I just want to warn victims of racism, if you have a gun in your hand, or even anything that looks like a gun, these suspected racists will use that as justification to kill you. Now, they use your black skin as justification to kill you, but this having a concealed carry permit and announcing that you have a firearm on your person, all you're doing when you go through that procedure that they tell you at these training courses is announcing that you are eligible to be terminated on site. There is no defense that a victim of racism has when they have a gun in their hands. You have no protection functionally under the Second Amendment provisions to the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. So be advised that when you have a gun in your hand, you are eligible for immediate termination, regardless of the procedures that you follow. Because as we can see, there is no logical way or there's no reasonable way that we can determine that Philando Castile could have defended himself. And also, when you do talk about defending yourself against racists, be in mind that you are oftentimes talking about these race soldiers. So my question for all of these proponents of black people procuring all of these guns and getting all of these permits and everything, my question would be, are you advocating violence against law enforcement that we suspect may be practicing racism against us in a way that may result in our death? Is that what you're advocating for? And, that's one question that I'd like to ask them. And finally, I just wanted to say, look, if you do have a firearm on your person and you pull it out and you present it, you should be prepared to use it. Because if you sit here and you flash that you have a gun and you brandish your firearm and you shoot warning shots, there are countless stories of victims of racism being arrested and then put into greater confinement because they did just that. So please, please, please be careful around these guns. And also in these moments of, when these race soldiers get away with killing us and then they make a big show about it in the media and they get us all riled up, do not fall victim to the urge to start announcing your emotional desires to kill or harm or commit any sort of violent acts against law enforcement. That's just the easiest trick in the book. The racists, they will scrape Facebook and YouTube for videos and comments following these incidences, and you're going to see in this next week a deluge of victims of racism that have been scooped up by the law enforcement authorities because of reckless posting that they have done online. I realize that these situations are very, very difficult to deal with, but
that
please,
is 5 minutes.
please,
We'll
please
leave it there.
urge.
Much obliged, Mr. Steele. Good recommendation for folks to watch The Emotion. I did want to make sure I got in just to make sure there's no confusion with the Philando Castile. I don't think he had a gun in his hand, unless I've been misinformed. I think he was reaching for his permit. Hang on one second. I think he was reaching for his permit, unless I've been misinformed, just for listeners with the case. I know that was last year, so people might have forgot some of the details. But yeah, I don't think he had his firearm in his hand. And just with that recommendation, I was reminded, folks recall one of our guests, listeners, investors, Vlaka, he had an exchange where he was stopped by an enforcement official. He does have a concealed carry permit, and he gave a great codified lesson. We pre-recorded it. It's in the compensatory call-in, but we had talked before the broadcast, and he recorded out exactly what he did, where he explained actually taking apart his firearm so that it was disassembled. It was in the seat by the time the officer arrived. The officer got there, and he said he had his concealed permit, the actual license, with him, and then he was able to say, yes, that I do have my concealed carry permit. My weapon is here, and I have already field stripped it. I think that's the technical term that they use, field stripping your weapon. So it's been totally disassembled. I think, as he explained on the program, the only thing he could have done with it at that point is throwing it. And he said that that worked really, really well. The officer was very pleased. He survived. Nothing happened. The officer was very pleased that he notified him of all this at the beginning, and the weapon was field stripped and visible in pieces, disassembled in the vehicle. That worked very well. And I remember he said that was going to be his code from this point forward, to try to minimize any likelihood. But you absolutely have to be very codified in general, but certainly if you're going to be a firearms weapon owner. Do we have other folks that we've not heard from at all? Folks that we've missed? We have roughly 30 minutes max left in the broadcast. The number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564-943#. Press *6 if you would like to participate. Any folks that we missed completely? Is anybody we missed? We got everybody. Nobody who has a hand up that we have not heard from at all. Grand. Folks have second comment. Any additional commentary? Oh, wait a minute. The caller, retired firefighter. Do you have commentary? I think we missed you completely. Retired firefighter.
This week, with the quote-unquote mentoring program, I really don't like using that term, but nevertheless, I'm affiliated with it, so that's what they call it. They was supposedly to have a meeting with the parents, and it seemed as though most of the staff was not satisfied with the attendance. It was very few parents who showed up. I just take it as a result of the global system of racist white supremacy, which causes people to think that, well, part of the solution may be to work with non-white black males in something called mentoring. But nevertheless, the report was disappointing. And that's basically all I have to say right now. I'll just will listen to everybody else's reports. Thank you.
Right on, retired firefighter. Other folks who dialed in, if there are other people we've missed completely, the caller is 6900. 6900. Did you have commentary?
Greetings, Gus. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings to the callers and the listeners. Jay from New York, just giving a call. Great clips. Wanted to just follow up on one, and I'm not sure if I missed it. I was kind of in and out for a little bit. Wanted to touch on the Ohio. I think it was the coroner that had reported that they had they're running out of room for the bodies of the victims of drug abuse from that area. And I guess Ohio, the U.S. Census numbers came out at about over 85% white individuals in that area. So I guess it's assumed, especially that we're not hearing any of this. I don't really watch the news a great deal, but I haven't heard a lot about this in the mainstream media. So I guess they're doing a great job covering it up. But maybe it's just because of my victimization and just not being just smart enough. I have not heard, even in the 90s, back in Brooklyn when things were crazy in New York, at any point that they ever said that a coroner's office, whether it was in New York or California, Chicago, that they were running out of room, especially with all the tons and tons of murders that came in with the drug wars and everything else. So it's just kind of, and I'm just probably trying to do some research through my mind, and also if anyone knows or heard this, but where are the melanated bodies going in comparison to where these white bodies are now kind of being backed up in a coroner's office? Just kind of interesting from that perspective. Also wanted to kind of give a huge black self-respect to the mother of Philando Castile for the report that I saw about commentary that she made. The Bill Cosby situation continues to kind of just, I think one of the callers mentioned it earlier. I definitely, from the clip that I heard, sounds like they're going to continue to push and keep him alive in the media until they get some type of result from getting him in a worse position than he is right now, because I'm pretty sure at his age, this has probably been a lot, enough. And I did want to double back to the Philando Castile clip that I heard. One of the things that sounded really terroristic to me is the judge mentioned that they wanted everybody to stay in the courtroom until the end. And the reason why I said black self-respect to her as well is the fact that she said, I don't care, and she just got up and left, to not be faced with the terroristic vision of seeing this murderer, this race soldier on the other side hugging and kissing his family in joy for this verdict. So again, I mean, I guess sometimes we don't think about just how those visuals are just so emotionally damaging. But I thought about that, and I thought about her and the family just having to deal with that. So again, just kind of, real self-respect to her for doing that. But that's about all I had. I'll mute my line.
Appreciate that. That was wacky. Other folks that if we missed anybody, if you have commentary, if we have not heard from you at all, if you've been one of the folks who've been listening, not commenting, spectating, if you have any comments you want to make sure you get in before the end, you should get your hand up now. For other folks that are listening and had additional comments they wanted to share, feel free. I think the caller who had, was seeking input, suggestions for how to proceed. He's in recovery, substance abuse, and was saying that he mentioned racism, like, hey, this is a part of why I'm having these issues, and was told, hey, we don't be bringing that into the church. We're not here to talk about racism. And he was asking about suggestions for how he should proceed, if folks have input on that. We also had a listener, she wrote in seeking input. We have a victim of racism, non-white female. She was in a tragic arrangement with a white person. She is looking to correct that, and moving forward, she is minimizing contact both with he and his race soldier family members. She's saying that they are seeking contact, requesting contact, calling and what have you, and trying to not have the divorce and the split go down, and just saying, how would you, she was asking, how would one manage contact with relatives? Would you just say, hey, I'm having a no contact rule and that's it? Like they still, have stuff that's got to be moved and all that, everything that's got to go with dissolving those type of arrangements. But would you just stick with the real hard no contact with any of the family, or would you make allowances to try to get through the situation? She was asking for input about that as well. Any other comments from folks listening in?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. So just wanted to just finish up with a couple minutes of the other observations that I made when I was at the Juneteenth festival. Real quickly, you can always learn things. I sent Gus a picture. It was of black females they did reenactments today. At first it was very tacky. I was kind of upset when I saw it, but then again, a little anti-blackness going on, but I got to see that I told myself they're victims of racism. So I actually went up and started talking to one of the women, beautiful woman, highly melanated, and you can just learn stuff. And she was doing a segment on cooking during the antebellum period, and she asked me, have I ever seen collard green seeds? And I never even thought about that. I was like, no, I never saw no. I said, no, I haven't seen collard green seeds. And then she started to tell me, well, collard green seeds were brought over from Africa and things of that nature, and these people had skills, and all these different non-white women were talking about the different skills that these women had during the antebellum period. And I know I should have known things like that, but I was fascinated, probably because of anti-blackness and racism, white supremacy, that whenever they talk about that period of time, they always talk about the black bodies and them being traded, but they never talk about how many of the racist white supremacist people that were purchasing them were also purchasing them based upon their skills that they already had when they were in Africa. And one of the women made it such a great point, and she said, black people were civilized while they were in Africa. They didn't come over here to be civilized. And it was just a great point to even hear people talking about that. During one of the interviews that I did in talking to non-white people, the last two young ladies you can tell they were academics, beautiful young ladies. They were academics. They were using different words that I've heard on this program before, like spaces. But it just seems like every time we start to have a conversation about racism, they did not agree with Mr. Fuller's definition of racism, which I brought up, but they started to use words like socialization and saying that white people, they socialize their children. And then the question became, is this intentional? And I'm like, man, I've heard Gus talk about that at least 100 times. And it's just amazing to always hear that comes up. And when I asked him, I said, well, do you think the socialization is intentional? And he said, well, I've never thought about that. And then I looked up the definition of socialization when I got home, and it's basically teaching people to behave in a certain or correct manner. And then I'm like, well, that sounds like you're teaching children how to be racist. But that constant question of, are white people intentionally doing this? I do expect white people to have that answer, like they're confused and they're using that privilege. But when Gus and Mr. Fuller and when everybody talks about on this call and on this broadcast about victims being confused, like those are the conversations that are going on in classrooms. Those are the conversations that are going on in people's homes, basically describing white people as being ignorant about what they're doing. And I did ask the young ladies, if you're dominating a group of people, how is it possible you're ignorant at the same time? But then when we didn't agree on the definition of racism, they didn't even think black people were being dominated. So when I talk about confusion and just really seeing these are the different conversations that are going on, talking about racism, white supremacy, and how even just talking about it, so many different victims have so many different opinions, but it all comes back to racism. And it was a good experience. I did notice quite a few different constructive things. Oh, one more thing, Gus. They had, when I first got there, they had an exhibit. I sent Gus the picture. It was artwork. And there were some T-shirts. And I walked up, and it looked like, black artwork. I don't know if it was Basquiat or whatever. And it was just all these white people sitting at a table. And I asked them, I said, oh, is this black artwork? And they were like, no. And I'm like, this is a Juneteenth festival. Why are there white people selling artwork? Like, this doesn't even make sense. Then we get to the back. I get to the back of the event, and they have a black female who's selling artwork that she's selling, that she painted out of her home. Beautiful stuff. I bought a piece, and she's in the back. But these white people are in the front selling Juneteenth T-shirts. And that was just really, really tacky and typical. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Carry me back to old Virginia. Even at the Juneteenth celebration, they got the black artists in the back selling their wares and the white artists out front. Incredible. Yeah, that's... if you don't understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. There's a reason Mr. Fuller has that in the front of his writings and emphasizes that point regularly. Very important. Other folks have commentary they want to make sure they get in.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. This is Ken Steele again, and I heard what I believe may be a racist joke in relation to the Cosby trial, and I was wondering if it was okay to share with the group.
Let's hear it.
Okay, yeah. So this is not my joke. This is a suspected racist from Chicago. He posted this. He said, if the OJ trial is any indicator, Cosby will eventually be sent to prison for stealing his own sweaters. So that was a racist joke that I picked up on my list or whatever. But also, for the victim of racism that is, I guess, encountering some trouble at his AA meetings, I go to open mic nights regularly, and I hear from the participants at these occasions that they're very similar to AA meetings. That's kind of a common joke that's told amongst comedians. And if there's any, if that statement is has any validity, then there's probably a number of different AA groups that you can join in your geographic region. You may want to explore different options, and you may want to, I'm not sure if, I hear 12 steps are a religion or whatever, but I don't know exactly how that organization works with respect to sponsors. But I suspect if a sponsor is not working out, then they would probably encourage you to find another sponsor. So I would, if I were you, take the time out to maybe find a new AA group to meet with. And then when you do meet with them, when you do present the first time, make it very clear that it was racism that is one of the main reasons that you were driven to drink, and it's one of your main reasons that is one of the main reasons that you find it such a challenge to remain sober. And if you come forthright with that being your story in that context, then anybody who deals with you afterwards in that environment is already going to know what you're about and is already going to, I guess, present themselves either as somebody that you can look to for constructive conversation or somebody that you should avoid. So that would be my suggestion. And also, I just wanted to include, because we've, I guess, undergone another very tumultuous verdict being read in the favor of the racists, one thing that I would suggest that victims look out for are these suspected racists that are posting a lot of videos and propaganda designed to get you to not look at racism as the problem, or to maybe perhaps not look at all these suspected racists as suspected racists. So, just be advised that they're running these scripts and these programs, and please, don't fall for it. And if you do have associates who are classified as white, ask questions. Don't let them ask you questions, and don't be convinced that they're ever going to try to help you or save you from this problem of racism, white supremacy. Thank you so much.
All right. Other folks have comments they want to make.
Heard?
Oh, yes, sir. We can hear you.
Yes, sir. I'm Honda C again. I just wanted to make it clear to everybody I wasn't not angry at black people. Any anger is not directed to any black person. I'm angry with white people. I also wanted to say, as far as the man who's dealing with sobriety issues, I don't drink alcohol. I don't do anything now, but I had started smoking marijuana in order to stop my thoughts or slow them down, because I couldn't slow them down, and I just couldn't stop thinking. Even when I'm asleep, I just feel my mind running so fast. However, it's not that time. It's not time to slow down. It's time to end these people. So I don't smoke anymore, especially after one of my associates was murdered. Had nothing to do with this guy. Had nothing to do with selling this marijuana. But yeah, I just want to say, to that individual, the man that's dealing with sobriety issues, just remember, if it helps you, we have to solve a problem. You can't do it if you're not sober. Thanks.
Right on. Other folks, if you all have commentary, last few minutes before we wrap up, again, we'll be here tomorrow. We have not really talked about the Grenfell Tower fire, which, in my view, directly relates to racism, white supremacy, but we will be talking about that tomorrow, and we'll have a number of black Britons here to speak to it directly. Other folks? Yes, sir. Thomas in New York.
Yeah, I wasn't going to comment on it, but, man, I could see that happening if the project started burning. Just let it burn. Yeah, that was sad, man. That was a huge building. To engulf in flames like that, it had to be all kind of fire code violations. It just doesn't seem logical. My question, I want to answer the gentleman's question. I apologize. I'm in a noisy part of the hospital. I would not keep that person as my counselor if he doesn't relate to my problem. It's like having a drug counselor, but he doesn't want to hear about someone using drugs. What causes my problem is this, and you don't want to hear it, then I need to find someone who does. And my question is to the gentleman, because I totally agree with him with not using the word white, but I'm kind of lost. What is an ice albino? What exactly is that, and where do they origin from? And I'll meet my line. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Ice albino, I'm trying to find a short way to say these people are albino. That's how we say it in America a lot of times. These people are albinos, and they're albinoid people coming from Europe after the last ice age. Some have said they developed above the 51st parallel from Europe and eastward. However, once you get to Russia, you start getting mixed with the Mongoloid folk. So the Russians aren't, So anyway, the reason I say ice albino, I'm trying to just give them a date, like a time frame, a location, a geographical location. The albino part is referring to their genetics. You can identify an albino. It's very easy. The thing is, we can identify these white people. They're almost the easiest people to identify. That's why you can look on the TV and say, oh, yeah, that might be a white person. That's dealing with the phenotype and the genotype. But if you look at Dr. Welsing's definition of racism, white supremacy, he also defines white people. So I hope that answers the question.
So you say albino from a black people albino, or that's where I'm confused at, because I have seen no evidence of two black people creating a white person. So that's why I'm asking you that, because the albino is black. So you can definitely not mix that up with a white person, any that I've ever seen. So that's why I was asking you that.
Yes, sir. So right. So there's albinos all over the world. There's even albino plants and albino animals. However, in order to get a sizable population of albinos, you have to start getting two albino. You have to mix the albinos together. That they were able to populate that particular area in Europe because they were isolated. And they look different from the albinos that we see because they're not completely albino. Their eyes don't have that twitch, and there's some melanin to their skin, but that's just because of what they've also been mixed with. But they look white. That's albinism. Thank
you. Can
you leave your contact information with Gus? So that way I could send him some information that might give him a little bit more insight on that, please.
I'll forward you his email, Thomas in New York.
Have you heard?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just real quick. Trump. I seen that Trump had basically since he got into office, he's been reversing everything Obama put in effect. So I think his latest one that he's doing is the mental illness prohibit from owning a gun. I think he's reversing that, so the mentally ill can own the weapon. And I found that very interesting, especially when Ken Steele was talking about as us blacks arming ourselves. I do advocate for owning guns and other people to own guns. I don't think it's on the behalf of the race soldiers out there. I think you have to arm yourself for these civilians because right now they're deputizing these civilians out here that are given the green light to act like these race soldiers just without the badges. So you have to protect yourself from them. So that's what I really promote is for blacks to have their guns and to be armed against the civilians, not so much less the police officers, because that's just an uphill battle that we're eventually going to have to fight in the long run regardless. But I do, when I carry my gun in my car, I already dismember the gun. And I also, what's worked for me, I'm very inquisitive. I ask a lot of questions when I run into black, because there's a lot of black officers and high-ranked deputies down here in Florida. What I do is when I network with them, I get their name and I tell them, I say, hey, you know, sometimes I get pulled over in these traffic and I be, you know, kind of scared. And they say, hey, you know what? Don't worry about it. This and that. So I say, hey, you know, if I get pulled over, can I use your name? And majority of them say, yeah, just use my name. And I use their name, and that's helped me a lot because a lot of times they know, a lot of these officers know who is who. And that helped me get out of a lot of tickets and a lot of bad situations. So that's worked for me. I don't know if it'll work for you guys, but that's just a suggestion that I'm putting out there, and I'll mute my line.
Right on. Interesting tactic. Right on. I think it's definitely worthwhile. I think there are quite a few things, a number of different scenarios where you can already practice whatever your code is for how you deal with different situations. If you are a firearms over, I think that's going to probably require you to think out in advance different scenarios. If you're going to have your firearm with you and how you deal with that, and other scenarios, what you say, what you don't say, that sort of thing. So you can kind of be thinking ahead of time. That way you don't get caught and have to make a quick decision where you might not make the best decision. Very important, I think, can be helpful also. Other folk, we got about 5 minutes, maybe get 2, maybe 3 if folks are brief with their commentary. Folks have anything else they want to make sure they get in, if it's a suggestion, comment, something they heard from other listeners that they want to get in quickly. Oh, the suggestion that I read myself, I'll make sure I get in. My view would be, I think, if the tragic arrangement situation would be to minimize contact with the white, quote-unquote, family members. If you already are pretty set that, you know, there is we're not going to reconcile, as they say. We're moving our separate ways, and, you know, this tragic arrangement has run its course, time to move on, then I don't think there's any need to have any reaching out and communing with the other racist family members. I think there's been enough of that already. We can, you know, just cut ties and move forward. That would be my suggestion. The male caller that spoke up.
Oh, Gus, I just had a question for you. When Mrs. Castile was addressing Philando's mother, was addressing the media, she made a statement that the system has failed black people, but then she also stated that there should be an expectation for all your interracial children to be killed as well. They're coming after you. Did you hear that? Did you notice that she stated that? Or does anybody know what she meant when she said that?
I don't know what she meant. The phrase that I saw, someone posted it on my Facebook page. Now they have it in quotes. It says, the system continues to fail black people, and it will continue to fail you all. When they get done with us, they're coming for you, for you, for you, and all your interracial children. You're next.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what. That was just interesting. That's all.
I agree. Noteworthy. Absolutely. Any other comments before we wrap things up? Anything else folks want to make sure they get in? Folks satisfied? Grand. We'll be here tomorrow. Actually, the next 2 days are both early broadcasts because the folks are joining us from different parts of the globe. So tomorrow, that's Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, and 12 Pacific, 12 noon Pacific. And then it'll be the same time this coming Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, 12 noon Pacific. Tomorrow, our Global Sunday Talk on Racism. We'll have our panel, our group, exactly as Thomas said. That exact thing that happened in London absolutely could happen right here in the U.S. You get a place and you just stockpile a whole bunch of black people, and they have been making reports that the building was unsafe, that they thought it was a fire trap. They have been saying that for years, that this sort of thing could happen, and then it did. But we'll be talking about that tomorrow. A lot of our black listeners in the UK, they were writing about this immediately. If you follow us on Facebook, I was posting a lot of the reports about this. A lot of our Akala, he's been a guest on our program, was talking about this incident and directly addressing racism. So that'll be tomorrow, and then we'll be addressing it again on Monday. One of my favorite guests, Esther Stanford Kose, she's been with us many times. As I said, she was just on the BBC earlier this summer talking about if white people can be, or rather giving a brilliant explanation as to why it is absurd to think of whites as victims of racism. But she'll be with us on Monday. These are both early programs. Esther Stankwith-Kose, she's been with us before, and she even gave great recommendations all the way from the other side of the world. She told us about the International Center for Traditional Childbearing, and even one of our other guests who talked about the impact of black girls not having black fathers. That was two outstanding guest recommendations that we got from her, but that'll be coming up this week. And again, Dr. Curry will be with us at the end of the month. If folks want to prep, check out his new book and get some questions to ask him in advance. With that, we'll be back in about 12 hours. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I hope it was a constructive investment of your Saturday evening. Think of good questions, remain constructive. To the caller working on sobriety, congratulations. I know that can be difficult, but I think it is a worthy goal. And in fact, under the system of racism, white supremacy, something we can all strive for. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. Lots of evidence, racists, they have done a phenomenal job keeping us intoxicated. Alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, all kinds of narcotics, to just keep cramming it in our system so that we cannot think to the best of our ability to solve this problem. Lots of evidence, racists, badge or no, they have done a job on us, particularly once we are not thinking correctly. Let's make sure that we can come up with great decisions, can use our brains to the best of our ability to put them out of business immediately. And we can save a few nickels as well. Think of it as a form of economic counter-racism as well, not giving them any nickels for their poisons. That's it. Again, email untiljustice@gmail.com if you have questions. You need to find something in the archive. You have a guest suggestion, gripes in general, untiljustice@gmail.com. That's it. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.